And a very good morning to you, Grenada, and the rest of the world. Today happens to be the 17th day of November, 2019. I'm George Grant saying welcome to today's edition of Sundays with George Grant. Right off the bat, let me explain to you that the format for the program's changed a little bit today because I needed all the time I could to facilitate two very special guests. Yeah, that's all we've got today, two special guests. But perhaps it's not fair to say that's all, because we have more than a handful today. Let's take a look at the rundown and you'll find out exactly what I'm talking about. First of all, I just want to let you know that yes, we are there on Facebook with you this morning, as we always are. And also on GrenadaBroadcast.com. And once the program is over, it's going to be uploaded to YouTube. So you got no excuses. Just in case you miss it, it will be archived on all of those sites. So you can go on back, watch and listen at your leisure. I see that Ernesto wins the race this morning. He's first to chime in. Manusart Alexander is second. Fitzroy Adams, Abraham Joseph, they're all there this morning. Let's get into the rundown. First of all, the buzz. And as we do every Sunday morning, we begin with a reading from the Holy Scriptures. No editorials. I got to be honest with you this morning. No editorials, and that's what I meant when I said that things are going to be switched around a little bit, and that's because I needed the time for my guests. Okay, so there are no editorials, which is very interesting because you know that for years we carried the Grenadian voice, and you're also aware that for the past year or so, we have not seen anything from the Grenadian Voice. But believe it or not, they sent an editorial to me this week, and I was so looking forward to reading that. But as we explained, we have to forego the editorials this morning. Something else we're going to be foregoing is the piece that we usually have from Little Angel. That's out the window this morning. However, we do have two features for you. The first one is captioned, The Grenada Revolution from a Different Perspective. In the past few weeks, you've been hearing a lot of, I dare say, revelations about the revolution. Because I thought that it was important that you hear directly from some of the people who were involved with the revolution. You know, there's no shortage of opinions in this place, absolutely no shortage of opinions. And yes, I admit, sometimes they're very accurate, but sometimes, to loosely use a word here, they're fabricated. I have made it my point of duty to forego giving any opinion about the revolution. The reason for that, I was not here. And there are a lot of other people who were not, and who, some were here but were not involved, but they have opinions. Well, you know, hey, free country, opinions matter. But I look for facts. And that's why over the past few weeks you've seen comments being made here on this program and the Good Day Grenada program by people who were involved in one way or another. And this morning, man, we're going right to the horse's mouth. We're going to be speaking with a gentleman whom just about everybody in this country knows. Former revolutionist. He's also the president of the Senate here in Grenada today. Senator Chester Humphrey. Just arrived, he's all settled in, and in just a moment, you're gonna see him. The other feature today is captioned, Charting a New Direction for the NDC. And at about 10:30 this morning, we do have the NDC's newly elected political leader, Franka Bernardine, who's going to be sitting here with me, okay? So essentially, yes, the format has been revised somewhat, but it's also abbreviated, if you will. So just before we get to Senator Humphrey, let us do what we do to begin every program, a very short reading from the Holy Scriptures. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10, 11, and 12, which says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Check it out yourself, Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 and 12. Okie doke. It's now 7 minutes after the hour, and I want you to take a look. Take a look. And Senator, could you? It's been a while since you've been here. I want you to.
It's a long time. Yeah.
It's thank you for being frank. It's been a long time, a couple of years. Begin with a smile. Take a look into that camera there. Look at Grenada and the world, and say, "Hi, I'm Chester Humphrey."
No, I'll say good morning to
Good
all
morning.
the listeners. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which to me is the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, thank you. Senator, I feel honored this morning because, like you mentioned, it's been a long time, and I hope it ain't gonna be another long time before we hook up. I'm really looking forward to this because for the past 33 years, that's how long I've been here, I just seem to keep learning. You know, I thought I'd heard everything about the revolution.
You can't hear everything. Life is a school. And,
You ain't kidding.
in every school institution, it's a learning and teaching experience, and one never stops learning.
Yeah.
And one never stops. Once one engages in life, you would be learning.
Yeah.
For many people, they don't comprehend the lessons that are being taught, but life in itself is a school.
Some people just don't learn.
Well, some people elect not to learn.
Yeah.
Others lack the capacity for learning.
Yeah.
But as I said, once you are living, you're learning,
Yeah.
because things are being taught and phenomena is being revealed every day.
Could you speak a little louder?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good.
Okay, that's
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Since I've retired from the trade union movement, I've sort of lost my trade union voice.
You have settled down. Is that what retirement does to people?
Well, the truth of the matter is, I probably am more busy now, because I can tell you that I was up at 3 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Okay.
And my night didn't end until about 11, and got back up at 3, because I do a lot of stuff. I am on an international parliamentary grouping, which brings together parliaments of Latin American countries, Canada, and the Caribbean. And I am on the board of the Gender Affairs Committee. We just came out of Paraguay, where we held our 6th
I heard about that.
parliamentary assembly. So I'm quite busy there. I travel next week, I think it is, on the 2nd to Antigua for Impact Justice meeting. In fact, Ruggles and I will be at that seminar. It's really a seminar having to deal with the constitutions and the role of the legislature in the context of constitutions of our various countries.
Okay.
So I'm very busy in that circuit. That's where I spend a lot of my time. And then I do some industrial consultancy work. So
You're not sitting on your hands.
Well, I can't afford to. I mean, my last one is still at university, so
Okay.
somebody's got to pay for it.
How many kids you got?
3.
3 kids.
Yeah, 2 are medical doctors, and the third is being trained as a commercial pilot. So
A commercial pilot.
that's right.
I would love to meet that one someday.
Yeah.
Moi used to be a pilot at one time.
Already?
Yeah, man.
Okay, so you have your PPL?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes. Well, I shouldn't say I have it because it's been years now that
Oh,
that
so you have
expired.
to renew.
Yeah, I have to renew. And when you start getting on an age, I'm 68 now. I find that there are a lot more important things to me than flying airplanes. Love flying airplanes.
Okay.
But
Well, he has had this obsession from every time I knew. I tried pushing him into medicine, but he resisted, and then I had
yeah,
to.
okay.
So he's chosen that field. So he's pursuing an aviation degree in New Brunswick, Canada. So he's over there. He's
In Canada.
he's going
My
into
stomping
his
ground.
final year.
Yeah.
So I still have to work, and besides, work gives me pleasure. I love to work.
Okay. And I see you're still looking young. You don't look a
I
day
am
older.
young. I am young, George. I don't know about others, but I am young.
You don't look a day older than the last time I saw you, man. Do you dye your mustache, Chester?
My mustache?
Yeah.
Everything about me is natural.
Natural. Yeah, okay. Congratulate. When I grow up, I want to be like you, okay?
When you grow up, you don't have much time, George. We've lived most of our lives, you know.
Do you have to remind me that, when I grow up, I won't have
But
much
I
time?
don't see you. You used to be walking down the stairs next to me, I guess, for your exercise. I don't
Yeah.
see that again.
I haven't done that in years. I used to walk. That's when I lived right under Government House there. There are 2 things that I did there.
No, but when you lived just off of the Tarantine playing field, you used to be walking up and down there.
Oh, yes,
I mean,
yes.
you would pass and see me mowing my lawn, and I still do.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
I still do mow my lawn. Yeah.
From there to the airport and back. That used to be my
yeah. Well, I bicycle.
ritual.
Bicycle.
Really?
Yeah, on Sundays I stay off the road now because of the traffic.
Yeah.
So I go in the Tarantine pasture, but when it rains, it's a bit muddy and
Yeah.
it gets pretty messy. But I try to get in some exercise. Medical science tells you that that's important for health, so I do it.
And I do believe it.
But
I
it
do
is
believe
true.
it, yeah.
When you exercise, you feel better.
You certainly do.
Yeah, you feel better. You have more energy. You're more mentally alert.
I just started going to the beach in the morning.
Follow Chesley David. That's the secret of
I'm
long
trying to
life.
replace Chas.
That's the secret of long life.
That's a nice experience. That's a
Yeah,
nice
very
experience.
good.
Senator,
And it's all free.
absolutely. And so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm
So
telling you.
beautiful.
Yeah,
We are truly blessed in this country.
you can say that again.
Senator, there's so many things that you and I could talk about this morning,
True.
but I'm going to just stick to one thing, which will give you an opportunity to come back and talk about the other things. All right?
As it suits you, I'm at your pleasure this morning, so.
The revolution, Senator. In the run-up to the recent October 25th
anniversary.
Anniversary, I decided, I've heard so much in the last 36 years about the revolution, but I have not really spoken to people who were involved, and I wanted to hear from them. So I began by doing a program where I spoke to, I think, 6 or 7 people, and I said to them, look, if I put a microphone or a camera in your face, what would you like the Grenadian people to know about the revolution that they have not heard in all the talk over the last 36 years? And I aired that, and it sparked quite a response. But during that program, somebody suggested to me that I should also speak to a couple other people. I got 2 people last week, George Worm from the New Today and William Joseph. And they did a heck of a job presenting the revolution from their perspective. And I underline that word, just from their perspective, which is just important as yours and everybody else. During that program, somebody said to me on Facebook here, why don't you invite Chester Humphrey? And I thought, and Chess, even though you've not been around here for a while, I was so pleased that as soon as I spoke to you, all it took was one phone call, and you said, sure, George, I'll come in. I also asked you to identify somebody else to come in with you, because I didn't want to do an interview per se. Interviews can be slanted. They can be. I've been in this business for 40-something years, and I'll tell you, interviews can be slanted by opinions. But what does my opinion really matter? I wasn't here, Chess. So you suggested Ruggles Ferguson. I asked Ruggles, and I think Ruggles wanted to, but unfortunately...
He has a very busy schedule.
Tell me about it.
In fact, I think he would be out of the country this morning. I'm not
Absolutely.
sure. But I know certainly his wife, Magistrate Gill, is traveling.
Yeah.
And I know Ruggles...
She's what, a master now or something like that?
She's acting as a master now. And she's traveling to some meeting or conference or seminar or something this morning, in fact. And then I believe Ruggles may be accompanying her, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I know as a fact that we will both be together in St. Kitts on the 2nd. And somewhere between now and the 2nd, he's got to be in Trinidad. So his schedule, Ruggles is quite busy, you know, because Ruggles does a lot of legal work.
Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Throughout the region, you know.
Yeah.
And before I left, I linked him with the LIALPA, that is the
Leeward Islands Air Pilots.
Islands Air Pilots Association. At that time, I was the chair of the combined unions, and there were some, 15 unions in 11 or 12 countries, and I was the founding chair of that organization and remained up until I demitted office just before I retired.
Okay.
And so he has a lot of legal work there.
Yeah.
In fact, 2 Grenadians headed it because Captain Michael Blackburn, a boyhood friend of mine, he became the president of LIALPA and was one of the better presidents and one of the more active presidents. Won a lot of cases that we did together, you know.
He's retired now, eh?
Yeah, Mike is retired now. Mike is retired now.
Okay. So, Senator, hence the reason you're here, because you were deeply, from what I've heard, involved in the revolution. And I want you to start this morning with a run-up to the revolution. There was an environment prevailing in this country which sparked this. And I want you to start from there. What sparked the revolution?
George, that's such a long... I would like to be very concise. Otherwise, I mean, we can spend 2 or 3 days here straight.
You only have 1 hour and 10 minutes right now.
I don't know. So I'll have to be very concise. You have to see these processes as a continuum. The March 13, 1979 Grenada Revolution. And let me just clarify one serious misnomer here. Some people who wish to reduce the historical significance of the event, and it's more out of mischief, a combination of mischief and ignorance, refers to the events of 1979 as a coup. That's not a coup. In classical political economic terms, a coup is when a standing military force, being part of the state, usurps power by taking power from the executive branch, whatever it is. That's a coup d'etat, all right? It's actually a French word that has been anglicized and shortened to be a coup. So you have a standing army. In fact, a coup is what has just occurred in Bolivia, right? what we had, and there was no standing army as part of the state, took the reins of government in this country. The reins of government in 1979 was taken by an armed grouping of the New Jewel movement, which overthrew that coercive arm of the state, scattered it, and seized political power. That's not a coup d'etat. In some cases, you can describe it as an armed uprising. In other cases, classically speaking, it's a revolution. So the 1979, it was indeed a revolution. To understand 1979, you have to throw back somewhat in history, and I'll be very brief. It's a continuum. There were 4 historical high points of struggle, political struggle in Grenada's history. We had the last heroic stand of our Aboriginal forefathers when they stood against the French and they were genocided. The French claimed that they jumped over Leapers Hill. Nothing is further from the truth. They were actually slaughtered, and the last remnants of them were were thrown over that cliff. That's one of the first high points. That's the first major resistance to colonial penetration and dominance coming from Europe. Then you had the Federalist Revolution in 1795. That is a revolution because it was successful. The Federalists took all of Grenada except the capital. And in those days, the capital was defined by the borders of the St. John's River, right, to the north. That's what you call the river in Queen's Park. And the surrounding areas there and the forts, because as you know, St. George's was embattled by forts surrounding it, right? And you know the governor was executed. That revolution was successful. It abolished slavery more than 35 years before the act of the British Parliament, because Fedon, who was a free colored mulatto, freed the slaves that he had, including the guy who became his second in command, a guy by the name of Chardon, who was subsequently, after the revolution, was suppressed by General Abercrombie from Trinidad and a military force. And Grenada was surrounded, and assistance could not come from Haiti, which had had a successful revolution before. The Federalists were eventually crushed, and that revolution demise. The third high point was 1951, when Grenada, when Eric Gary led the third revolutionary upsurge of the agro-proletariat, were the principal class force in that struggle, all right, in 1951. And then the fourth high point was 1979. So there were 4 high points. Now, how and where do I fit in all of this? I got involved in the political struggles of Grenada at a very tender age through a cousin of mine, Samuel Harry. Samuel Harry, a student at the Grenada Boys Secondary School, was drawn to the work of Derek Knight. The late Derek Knight, the founder of the Technical and Allied Workers Union, when he returned from the UK, because I think he had 2 sojourns, he came back first. Derek, I think, when he traveled to England somewhere in the, I believe might have been in the late 40s, I'm not sure, did electrical engineering or something. And then when he came back, went back to England and did law. And in the United Kingdom, in those days, it was the heady days of the anti-colonialist movement, in which Caribbean intellectuals, people who had gone to the UK in a post-war situation to rebuild the cities of the UK which were destroyed during the war. It was a confluence of people from all over Africa. You had significant political individuals and intellectuals like George Padmore, C.L.R. James, and others. Of course, the impact of the Soviet Union in World War II, the fact that the Soviet Army was the principal force which destroyed Nazism. As you know, the Soviets lost 18 million citizens during that war. The largest block of persons who lost their lives in that war came from the Red Army, and it was the Red Army, well, I wouldn't say single-handedly, but the Red Army played a major role in the defeat of Nazi Germany. And as a result of that, the European colonial powers were weakened, but also the ideas and thoughts of scientific socialism and the idea and thoughts of socialism were then transported. And so a lot of people who were recruited in the British army, taken from the colonies to fight essentially a European capitalist war, a fascist war, became enlightened. And people's consciousness was awakened. Here it is, we were dying for the mother country, but even on the battlefield, there was racism. We were not treated equally. People of non-white racial complex were pushed to the forefront, poorly trained, took a lot of casualties, were very heroic, and so on. British colonialism was weakened by that war, and therefore you had the rise of nationalism in the territories, the coming of independence to India. In 1945, I think India became independent, or 47. A little bit rusty on the history now. And then, of course, this idea of national liberation and so on as a result of the war and the weakening of the British, the hold on the empire and so on, gave rise to an international movement for independence. And you had several independence movements, the more famous like the Mau Mau, what the British call uprising, but it was in fact a revolution for national independence on the African continent. And West Indians, as we were then referred to, George Padmore, C.L.R. James, Amy Césaire, Frantz Fanon, all of these people came to the fore. And as you know, Frantz Fanon has been a major player from an intellectual and philosophical point of view. He was a medical doctor in psychiatry by profession. He did a lot of research work on the negative impacts of colonialism on colonial peoples. And a lot of his writings opened the minds of people. So it was a period of significant political activity in the world. Then, of course, you had the coming to power of Cheddi Jagan. And then all of these forces were then supported by the Soviet Union. And many people looked towards the Soviet Union as a model for economic development. Then, of course, you had the coming to power of Fidel, right, and the Cuban Revolution, and that had its own impact on this part of the world. And so in Grenada, Derek Knight had founded a young student movement based on the tenets of socialism. It is my understanding that Derek, while in London, as most blacks who would have gone to the UK in that period, was drawn to political activity. It's my understanding, and Derek did confirm that to me at one time, that he had joined the British Communist Party. And so when he came back to Grenada, he came back to Grenada with a progressive socialist outlook. And he brought together quite a number of young Grenadians. Many of them were schooled at the Grenada Boys Secondary School, people like Ronnie Glean. I think Winston White, you may have had an association with that. You can double check Winston on that. And so that my early introduction into politics was in and around that time. My cousin was one of the young activists in the movement. And I could remember those days, the GNP was in office in those days, because I remember the police would be going around raiding the homes of people looking. In those days, it was unlawful to have certain kinds of literature. You couldn't get literature. It was an offense punishable by imprisonment. That was the extent of democratic freedoms then. And a lot of literature used to come up from Guyana, from the PPP and Chetty's party. And Sam used to have this literature. And when the police were about to raid, he would give us these books. And as kids, we will keep the books inside our exercise books, but the police weren't looking. And that sort of enticed me, and I began to read very early and very profusely, because in those days there was no television. Radio was the BBC, those old tube radios. Mm-hmm. And the BBC was not just a broadcast station, notwithstanding its broadcasts of British colonial propaganda. It also was a very highly educational broadcast and its reputation. So in my household, I grew up with the St. John's on Tyrrell Street. Mr. St. John worked with T. Albert Marshall. Marshall, he was the other side of the coin of Marshall because he was a printer. He ran the entire printing operations of the West Indian. As you know, Grenada has held a celebrated position in journalism in the Anglophone Caribbean, and the West Indian found itself circulated in all of the islands and even in the UK. If you go into the British Library, you would see copies of the West Indian there. And many people don't know that T. Albert Marshall was a renowned and celebrated journalist, and his writings and so on were read very widely. Copies were closely kept by the Colonial Office, right? Because in those days, the people were jittery about what was then so-called communism and communist activity. And so that's the environment in which I grew up. Within the environment of the home of the St. John's, there was a lot of intellectual discourse and discussions on topical issues and on politics, and it was a very athletic family. So, you know, that's the environment in which I grew, and therefore my politics grew out of that. And very, very young, by the time I was about 13, I had already read the Communist Manifesto. I had copies of it. By 14, 15, I was trying to engage in Das Kapital. Couldn't quite understand a lot of it, but was reading a lot of stuff. And so my socialist Marxist orientation long predated the New Jewel movement.
All right.
So that, if I can encapsulate my evolution politically in those days.
Now let's talk about you getting physically involved with the revolution.
Okay, so that took me there and into secondary school. We then formed the student movement begun. And there were individuals like Dr. Crofton Stroud right now. A lot of people don't know that Crofton Stroud was an activist in the student movement. By that time, Gary came into office. Gary won the 1967 elections. And it's at that stage, Grenada moved to become internal self-government was then given, right? And the student movement arose in the GBSS, and that would involve people like Wilfred Lane, Barry McBarnett, the late Barry McBarnett. Barry, first of all, founded the Young Power movement, and he took that from Michael Alves in Trinidad, who, in and around the time of the rise of the Black nationalist consciousness movement in the United States, it found a slightly different expression in the Caribbean, in the sense that in the immediate post-independence period, because Trinidad became independent after the demise of the Federation, I think that's in 1962. And so we had black governments succeeding the colonial powers that were receding, because the international division of labor had changed, and it was no longer necessary to occupy directly colonial presence, especially in the Caribbean.
All right, tell me about your direct involvement.
So we were very active and were forerunners in the student movement. That led us to form several organizations. I was involved then with what was called the Forum, which published a weekly newspaper in Trinali. Then when Morris came back from the UK and founded Movement for the Assemblies of the People, Morris was more in line with black nationalism. The Movement for the Assemblies of the People was influenced by the ideological, philosophical, and political work of Julius Nyerere out of Tanzania, right? And in those days, the University of the West Indies was a bedrock of activity. So you had people like, Walter Rodney at that time came back from Tanzania where he was teaching, landed a lecturing job at Mona in Jamaica and began work. He produced a very profound pamphlet called Grounding with My Brothers, and that became the sort of Bible for all political activists. And we began our work here, and the anti-Gary movement began. So that although we had black leaders, the fact of the matter is that the black leadership only took the struggle so far as political independence were granted to the territories, but there were no substantial internal transformations of the individual societies. Essentially, the political space created by the granting of independence was all that was achieved. There was no attempt to restructure the society. Class and race has always played a formative and significant role in the political economy of our various countries. So you had a situation where, yes, you had black leadership with political power, but essentially the economy rests in the hands of the remnants of the planter class, the new merchant elite, some of which had risen as a result of the political space in the case of Grenada after the 1951 revolution. The 1951 revolution had a number of substantial socioeconomic benefits. The first and most significant was the beginning of the end of institutional racism, and Gary must be credited with that, because in those days you couldn't work in certain institutions simply because of your family background and more so of your color. The 1951 revolution, in terms of its programmatic platform, won first universal adult suffrage, because prior to that, the black masses couldn't vote, because voting was based on your property rights. So you had to have a certain amount of property in order to write. But 1951, after a British commission came through the Caribbean, because there were significant uprisings all throughout the Caribbean, in Jamaica, in Trinidad and Tobago, the works of Uras, Bus Butler, and Grenada has always played a very significant role in all of these social movements throughout the Caribbean. And so, notwithstanding that there was black power, the fact of the matter is that the social stratifications, with some minor alterations, by and large remain the same.
All right, I want you to focus a little bit more, Chess, on your involvement, because from what I'm sensing here on Facebook this morning, people are very curious about the role that you played.
Well, I'm coming, as well. You see, if I dropped in the
preamble,
middle, then they wouldn't, but yeah, let me be as brief as I could. Okay. So that led to, well, that was my political involvement. As I said, we led the movement. And then Gary, sensing that there was a shift in the political base, decided to resort to violence and repression. And there was a relentless attack on students. Gary then formed a paramilitary group, the notorious Mongoose Gang. And I was a victim of the Mongoose Gang. One night, we used to study, at that time we were now studying for O and A levels at the GBSS. And one night, returning from studies around midnight, where the old Cable and Wireless building is on what was then called Jack's Alley, which is Hughes Street, that street that connects Tyrrell Street to the Caranahaj. I was ambushed by a group of secret police. Apparently they were following me, unknown to myself, from the time I left Undine. I walked along the carronage in front of the fire station, nothing happened. But when I got to that piece of the street, they closed in on me from two angles. I couldn't run either way, because to run up, a small contingent was coming down what was, as it's properly called, Jack's Alley, and I couldn't run back because the group that was following me. So I was actually cornered between there, and then they started raining blows on me. I eventually escaped by climbing over the gate. Cable and Wireless, then telephone company, had a gate, and there was a yard in there where the trucks were parked. So I was able to, with underblows with baton and electric wires, I was flogged, but I got over the gate. When I got over the gate, made a lot of noise, and then the security was asleep, woke up. But then there was a wall which took me to the back of what was then Teacher Bland School. That is the back of what was now Abu's building. Well, that is home turf. So although they came over the gate, because they shook the gate open and the security guard, in order to take me away, I was able to escape in the back there and ended up by Brathwaite Shop, then ran up to Park Lane, down Green Street, and eventually got home. I was thoroughly mauled and had to be hospitalized and so on. And that was my first encounter. Well, that led to the student movement intensifying its work.
All right.
And so on. Now, when Morris came back, he discovered, Morris and I had a very, what would I call, epic meeting. Morris' sister, Maureen, married my uncle. So there was an in-law relationship. And when Morris came back from England one night, in the week that he came back, he visited the home on Turtle Street, right, where the St. John's lived. And as I said, that was always a center for discussion. I could remember that very clearly. It was a Friday night. We were all discussing and arguing on different issues, and it was me against the rest. I mean, all my uncles, they were older than me, but I was a little kid. Ashley Taylor had come back not too long ago to open practice as a lawyer. And there was George Lashley, and we were all arguing the pros and cons of Black Power and Black Power movement and so on. And in came Morris on a visit, and he just stood there listening to the discussions. And then somebody invited him to comment. And he said, well, you know, gentlemen, I don't know who this youngster is, but I happen to agree with him. And that's how the relationship between Morris and I started. And,
okay, which led to your
right, which led to, so when Morris, and in those days, Morris lived on the Ponthrew Street. That is the street when you come down Market Hill. If you're coming down Market Hill, that street on your left, popularly called Cockroach Alley.
Yeah.
Right, that's the Ponthrew Street. Morris lived there with Angie.
If you're coming down Market Hill, isn't it on your right?
Yeah, it's on your right.
You're right.
Coming down.
Yeah, yeah.
Morris lived in a house there, which subsequently became part of the headquarters of Capital Bank. He lived there when he came back, and so we would be meeting there. We were discussing all kinds of political and local issues and so on. In those days, Gary was after the Nutmeg Association, which was one of the richer organizations, and he was trying to find ways and means of state control. Morris was providing legal advice and so on, so we were meeting there people like Wilfred Lane, Barry McBarnett. Well, his name is now Siddiqui, but he was called Shaky Sylvester in those days when I knew him. And quite a number of us were meeting there. Then Morris founded Movement for the Assemblies of the People. And as I said, that was influenced by the writings of Julius Nyeri and so on, and the Ashura Declaration, which was contained in that book. And Kenrick came back, and Kenrick and Morris and myself, I was the youngest member there. I was at the founding conference when the Jewel and the MAP joined. At a founding conference in Massachusetts, I was at that founding conference. I became the youngest member of the political bureau of the then New Jewel movement. I was secretary for Pan-African and Caribbean Affairs, all right? And then work started there overall. After I left secondary school, I purposefully went on the docks which was part of my program of trying to recruit workers. So that political work, then we started to print the New Jewel movement. The New Jewel, which was the organ, that paper was printed first in Morris's house. Then it went underground and we shifted it around. Printing then took place in Unison's house. Unison was then living in Montparnasse. And then we took it up to the country to Teddy's Victor's house. And we were moving it around because in those days the paper had to go underground. So that's a long and so history until the 1973, 1974. A lot of people, while talking about Morris, fail to be conscious of the fact that I don't think, maybe outside of the history of the Federalists, there has not been another family in the history of Grenada, certainly in its recent history, I'm going to say recent history in the last 5 years, that has paid such a heavy political price for its political contributions. Because I was witness to the open battles in the street in 1973 when Morris's father was assassinated by a member of the Grenada police force. All right, and that happened in Otway's house. And so you have to understand 1979 in the context of all of this. George, it may be better for me to answer questions because I could be pretty long-winded.
Yeah, and I see that the audience is getting a little bit impatient. They want to find out about you, Chester Humphrey, your direct involvement in the revolution, because you were very influential. Come on.
Well, I would have thought, George, from all I have said, is an indication of what my involvement is.
I think you have given a very good preamble leading up to this, because things don't just happen. They're things that...
Well, that's true.
Right.
That's absolutely true.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about your involvement. You guys were unhappy, which led to some action being taken to form some sort of reaction to the Gary administration. Let's talk about the strategy that was employed.
Well, as I said, the anti-Gary movement had several different organizations. So for example, the Forum Group with people like Ian Francis, even Clarence Ferguson was involved. We produced the then, there was a news organ called the Forum, which we produced on a weekly basis. That was very critical of Gary. We did a lot of political education of the people. Barry then founded the Young Power movement, to which I was involved in a limited way. And the reason why I didn't get fully involved is I argued with Barry that the problems of young people was a systemic problem of the system, and that unless you address the system, then the problems of young people could not be adequately addressed. Then I founded the National Socialist Youth Movement, all right, because my orientation, as I said to you before, has always been along the line of socialism, Marxism. When I founded that movement involved several people like Huey Romaine, people like Valentino Soni, I think Tessa Stroud and others were involved in that. Then we founded the National Student Council. We brought all unfounded student bodies. So that's my involvement in terms of political activity. As I said, when the MAP merged with the Jewel, I was at the founding conference. I became the youngest member of the political bureau. In those days, the library for the political bureau was held in Lloyd Noel's office. Lloyd Noel was a member of the New Jewel movement. I heard on your program, I can't remember which one of them said that Bernard was not a member of the New Jewel movement. That's not true. Bernard he was not a founding member, but he became a member of the New Jewel movement. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that the NGM Manifesto, which today is still a very relevant document for the economic development and transformation of Grenada, was written in the main by Bernard Cord and Franklin Harvey. All right, Franklin Harvey was based at the University of the West Indies. He was an early Marxist, more in the mold of C.L.R. James, what people would describe as a Trotskyist outlook. But he had a significant influence in promoting socialist views and outlook in Grenada. In and around that time, when I was getting to migrate, based in the Presentation Brothers College, a new youth organization, OREL, was formed. Again, for corrections to what was said in your document, Bernard Cord did not form OREL. OREL was an organization formed before Bernard Cord became directly involved.
In my document?
Hello?
You said what was said in my document?
No, what was said on your program last week.
Oh, okay,
When I said document, I meant that. Your program last week, OREL was founded by people like Liam James, Ewart Lane, and others. It was not an organization founded by Bernard. Bernard used to be into Grenada periodically. He did hold and started a series of educational, political educational classes. I attended a few, but the truth of the matter is when I attended what was being discussed, I was way in advance of what was discussed, the elements and ABC of socialism. I had already long read those material and so on, so I didn't find much interest in it. So that, in an extent, is my involvement. All right? I would prefer to answer questions rather than, because I don't know what people want clarified, but so.
Okay. Tim Tom Ortega says, George, as a veteran journalist, you're allowing this guy to ramble and deflect from your question of his involvement in the revolution. Did he ship guns to Grenada before the revolution? What was his role throughout?
Well, let me say, on that question, George, of whether or not I ship guns, I've heard that accusation. What I would say, you'll have to read that in my memoirs whenever they're written.
You what?
He will have to read that in my memoirs whenever they are written.
And you do intend to write your memos?
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
Okay. All right, Chester. Let me take a little break here and pay some bills and regroup, and we'll be right back with you after this.
Christmas safety tips. Always unplug Christmas tree lights before leaving home or going to sleep. Check your tree lights and outdoor lights for damage each year before you use them. Discard lights with frayed wires, loose connections, and cracked sockets. Do not overload your wall outlets or extension cords. Remind children never to touch lights or outlets. Select lights appropriately. Never use indoor lights outside or vice versa. Happy holidays from Grenada.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Because your vehicle is a necessity, being roadworthy is critical. Hubbard's Motor Department introduces its new tire and battery sales and service outlet located at Building Supplies Compound in Grand Anse, close to the Sugar Mill Roundabout. Available are a wide range of competitively priced tires, maintenance-free batteries, oils and lubricants. Keeping in mind your busy schedule, this outlet is equipped to provide you with fast and reliable service. Simply drive in and you'll be delighted with your service experience. For more information, contact 440-2087. Hubbard's, quality service, affordable prices.
With Grenada poised to record its 7th consecutive year of robust growth in 2019, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell, will present this country's 2020 budget on Wednesday, November 20th, outlining his government's plans to further drive the economy and spur investor confidence. Under the theme Towards Vision 2035, empowering our communities, growing our economy, protecting our environment, strengthening our institutions, Dr. Mitchell will lay out plans to forge ahead with a shared goal for the future, envisioned in the country's 2020 to 2035 National Sustainable Development Plan. The 2020 budget will be broadcast live on GIS Channel 22 and the GIS Facebook page. Beginning at 9 a.m., we will look at some of the government's major projects over the past year. From 9:30 a.m., there will be live commentary, and from 10 a.m., presentation of the 2020 fiscal package. Tune in to the Government Information Service and other stations for the live broadcast of the 2020 budget, Wednesday, November 20th, 2019.
Why wish upon a star? For a bank is better by far. Whatever you're wishing for this Christmas, we'll give you low interest and no fuss.
Co-op Bank is making Christmas wishes come true. Fix up your home, treat your loved ones, and get everything on your Christmas list this year with our no-fuss loans. As we count down the 12 days to Christmas, you can win awesome prizes every day. Special terms and conditions apply.
Christmas wishes come true with Co-op Bank and you.
Welcome home.
All right, folks, we are back. Are we back? This is certainly not the picture we were looking for. Now we got the picture we were looking for. Yours truly and Senator Humphrey. Senator, while we were taking that break, a number of comments came in here, and I just want you to take these to heart. John Nosyneck says, I have just wasted 40 minutes of my life with this waffle. If you don't want to answer, don't show up. Vincent Rubin says, Chester is one of the most deceitful men I ever come across in my born life. Tim Tom Ortega, I'm just going to read all of these and then you can take them on later. Tim Tom says, why can't he return to the United States since he left? Sharon Roberts says, Chester is correct in giving background. Be patient. Lori Bridgman says, so much has been said. I learned a lot. Leon Cummings says, Chester, today you find yourself in a greedy organization and forget the workers. Ernesto Jose says, I knew we're getting an excerpt from a book deal. Allison Mathlin says, Boom Chest, come to the point. Stop ducking. Chester, you want to take on any of those comments? You said you'd rather answer
George,
questions.
Some comments, it doesn't worth the breath to respond to them. I answer what I feel I should, and I don't answer what I feel I shouldn't. It's as simple as that. And if that irks some people, well, then that's their problem, not mine.
Claudius.
In respect to abandoning the workers, well, I can tell you, I don't know that there's a man dead or alive who has done more and continue to do more for workers than I have. And if I begin to detail those for you, we'll be here up until next year. But suffice it to say that since I demitted office in Tau, without having to go on the picket line or to call a strike or to call a march, workers in this country have had the following: a complete removal of personal income tax on their severance and retrenchment pay, so that the workers who elected not to go over to the successor employer, in the case of Scotiabank of recent vintage, have been able to go home with all of the severance pay provisions under a contract that I negotiated, and in some instances, their compensation is several hundreds of thousands of dollars. Since I demitted office, I have been able, on the basis of where I occupy now, gotten the government to remove personal income tax, not only on severance pay, but also on pensions, so that workers who are retiring today go home with all of the pension emoluments. In June of 2012, in a meeting held between the New National Party and myself, then as President General of TAU, in a meeting of our management committee, we placed 27 demands before the New National Party, then in opposition. And most, if not all, of those 27 demands have been met. So in respect to the issue of abandoning workers, there's nothing further from the truth. Subsequent to my demitting office, I have offered free consultancy to a number of workers on all different kinds of issues. I mean, workers still come to me, especially managerial employees who are not represented by trade unions. So I don't pay attention to windbags. That's how I describe them.
Okay.
Right? That's just windbagging. And I pay absolutely no mind to that at all.
I'm sure
it bothers me not.
I'm sure, again, the offer is open to come talk with us anytime, including about the labor situation,
Yeah,
okay?
but I don't invite myself, George. You'll have to invite me. If you don't
I'm inviting you.
Well, yeah, but once you invite me and I'm available,
Okay, yeah.
I show up.
Claudius McLeod says, I was not in Grenada during the Revo, but many who experienced it laud the period for its empowerment of the people. The question is whether the leaders of the Revo were seeking totalitarian governance with socialism to appease the people, or a more social democratic structure to strengthen the voice and prospects of all Grenadians, a la Scandinavian.
The latter is the case, George, but you have to remember things evolve. I would be the first to admit that serious mistakes were made in the revolution, including its very demise. All right? And the demise of the revolution, George, when you live for something, and the Grenada Revolution had been my life. It had been the high point in what I live for. And my work in the labor movement is nothing short of a continuum of the Grenada revolutionary process. And I want you to recall, George, that when I became associated with the National Democratic Congress, I became associated after, on more than one occasion, I turned down a request from George Brezan. I will say this now and say it openly. George Brezan had called me.
Go ahead.
And asked me whether or not I would consider coming into the leadership of the New Jewel movement, of the National Democratic Congress. George and I have always had a very good and positive relationship. Not always agreeing on everything, but we always had a very positive relationship. And I turned it down. I eventually came into the National Democratic Congress on an invitation, strangely, by Tillman Thomas, because I was giving them advice. When the NDC won the 7 seats in 2003, the headquarters of the leader of the opposition, Tillman Thomas, was in the Tower Annex. And I arranged to give them that facility at less than 1/3 the rent that we were then earning at the time. I could hear. Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm saying I kind of lost my train of thought. The point I'm making here, George, is that for me, Grenada is the center of whatever I do. I want the callers to recall that I did not leave the National Democratic Congress. I was expelled from the National Democratic Congress. But prior to my expulsion, I became disillusioned with the National Democratic Congress because I discovered the class nature of the National Democratic Congress was not in the interest of the working class. And everything I do politically has always been an extension of my ideological outlook. No, I support the New National Party. I am a member of the New National Party, not because of anything I get from the New National Party, but simply because, personally speaking, but simply because I have been able to get for workers significant benefits that workers for years have been struggling for. All of the benefits that I have secured from the New National Party and from Prime Minister Mitchell were benefits I sought under the National Democratic Congress. Chris Riggs, if he's honest, can tell you that we met on several occasions on a one-on-one where I was detailing the demands that I think that the government can deliver.
Okay.
My final straw, which broke my relationship with the...
Hold on a minute. Before you get to that, there's a caller here who I suspect wants to ask you or say something. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Hello.
Good morning, Citizen Grant.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Listen, I want to throw this thing out there. Greetings to your best citizen Humphrey. I call him citizen. I don't know that lately. Listen.
Well, I call you Comrade Rollo.
I laud and applaud everything Chester said. Truth is good history. We should record it and record it well. But I want to move forward a bit, Citizen Humphrey. You're in a position today where you make laws in this here country. You must have known, because you've been here all the time.
That in 2002, a document, first of all, there was a Commission for Constitution Review set up. And it made certain recommendations in the preliminary document, which was a sort of orientation document, where it stipulated crystally clear that the Constitution of Grenada has never been made into law. In other words, it was never approved by the Parliament, nor by the people of this here country in popular referendum. My questions to you are as follows. One, are you aware of this document? And two, what do you intend to do about it? Do you believe that it should continue and the people of this country should continue to live in a country without a properly installed constitution which brings about illegitimacy to it? I'd love to hear your comments on that, Chester. Thank you very much and do have a nice day. Will you?
Well, Comrade Rollo, I am not a constitutional lawyer. Indeed, I'm not a lawyer. Although I probably have read more law than quite a number of lawyers. I've certainly passed. I'm nearing, 29 years in the Parliament. But from all the constitutional experts, John, all that I have come across, we have had several cases that have gone to our highest appellate court, and that is the Privy Council, an internationally renowned judicial body, and none have held that the Grenada Constitution is not fit and proper. You're the only person I've heard carrying this line. I am unable to comment other than what the experts have said. Dr. Francis Alexis is a celebrated constitutional lawyer of exceptional intellectual distinction, recognized throughout the length and breadth of the Anglophone Caribbean, recognized in all of the jurisprudences that practice British jurisprudence in Africa and other places. And he holds that the current constitution is fit and proper and in order. No, 1 million men can be marching wrong with one man marching right. I don't know if that's your case, but all I can say on the basis of the evidence before me, that you are manifestly wrong. That's all I can say. And I say so not on the basis of the strength of my own knowledge, because I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I'm saying so on the basis of all of the experts, not one of whom have ever agreed with you.
All right. Laurie Bridgman says, you did a great job as a trade union leader, and I hope you can do better in your senatorial position.
Well, George, let me just say, I try.
Quickly.
I try. As you know, I am rarely the presiding officer. The only time I'm allowed to vote on a matter is where a casting vote has to come. But I try. I mean, and I think no one can accuse me of operating in the Senate unfairly or with a bias. There was a recent news item which I did not have the opportunity to address. But then again, the office that I occupy, I'm supposed to do that with a certain level of decorum, and therefore cannot descend into the pits of Bacchanal and TV and so on. But it was a statement that I suppressed Senator Andrew Lewis from making his contribution, and that was manifestly incorrect. The Hansard will show that. The Hansard will show that I encouraged Senator Lewis to make his point, but bearing in mind that the standing orders and the rules require certain things, and once you stuck within the rules, in other words, the only restraining matter that I introduced then was that he ought not to introduce issues of a national security nature in discussing the question. Right. But I never suppressed the debate.
There are some more comments I want to get to here, but let me sneak this call in first. Good morning, you're on the air. Good morning. Hello, caller.
Yes, good morning, Citizen Grant. Once more, let me just ask this question then. Can Mr. Humphrey tell me how, when, and where the Constitution of Grenada was made into law? In other words, legitimized through enactment in the Parliament of Grenada and by popular referendum of the people? Thank you very much.
Well, I don't have that information at my fingertips. I get it is something that I can research. But again, I could only repeat what I said earlier.
All right, Margaret Francis is in New York. Margaret is saying here, Chester, you spoke of mistakes the rebel made, both during and at its demise. What were those mistakes?
Well, first and foremost, George, I thought that we should have gone to early elections. In fact, when Jim Wadali and I came back here, it was in October 1979, we returned to Grenada. We had argued that we should have moved for holding popular elections. And our reasoning was simply this, that with popular elections, not that it would stop those who were opposed to the model of development that we were proceeding, but it would have taken one less arrow out of the body politic. And that was our thoughts. Interestingly enough, by 1983, the party had come to that position, and the party had begun to initiate a program for constitutional reform with a view to holding elections, and a constitutional commission headed by the late Alan Alexander was appointed. And that was not a tactical step. It was a strategic measure, because we needed to give sort of what I would call, although the revolution was legitimate, but in the eyes of the traditions of the region, it would have given, it would have reduced 1 point of contentious difference, because revolutionary forces, if that election was conducted, and it could have been conducted in an open way, right, would have won. I thought that was a significantly major mistake, and it paid off, and we suffered for it. The second mistake is understanding the climate in which the revolution took place. There was a fair degree of arbitrariness that in retrospect was not necessary. And thirdly, I would say something which I would not expand on, but it was controversial, there was really no justification, retrospectively speaking, for the execution of Morris. None.
All right. Beverly Sinclair says, Senator Humphrey, it is said that you are one of the persons who organized the shipment of guns to Grenada from the USA for the revolution. Can you speak to this?
Well, Beverly, I said so earlier. I said on that question, you'll have to read it in my memoirs. And I will repeat it if you joined the program late or if you missed what I said. On that particular question, you'll have to read the answer in my memoirs. I mean, if I sell everything now, my books won't sell. So.
Ron Redhead says, Mr. President, leave the NDC alone. Since you are on the NDC, are you on the NDC?
No, I used to be on the NDC.
Oh, that's right, okay.
I used to be until I was expelled.
What is your take on the future of politics in Grenada?
Oh, that's a broad question. Politics in Grenada. Politics will be politics. Politics, it may change, it take a different focus. New forces will come to the fore. Generations go and generations come. Politics is simply the engagement of public policy on an issue.
Kellen Bob says, Chester, how do you reconcile your relationship with a right-wing organization such as the NNP, given your socialist leanings, and given Dr. Mitchell's party's relationship with neoliberalism?
Well, let me put it to you, life is a complex. The same right-wingers that you've talked to and the same Dr. Mitchell that you talked to, right? It was Dr. Mitchell who brought Fidel Castro to Grenada. It was Dr. Mitchell who reestablished, after the demise of the Grenada Revolution, where everyone dared to tread. It was Dr. Mitchell who reestablished relations with Cuba. It was Dr. Mitchell who sent hundreds of ordinary poor people children to study medicine and so on in Cuba. It was Dr. Mitchell in the height of the anti-communist, anti-revolution campaign under the Blaise administration, right? Where Grenadians trained in Cuba as doctors, Dr. Terry Marichaud et al., were banned from practicing their profession. It is the same Dr. Mitchell who hired Cuban engineers. So, as I said, life is a complex, and you don't look at life as one event. Life is a series of events, and in some instances, complex events. So that is a complexity. That is a complexity of life. So I hear you, but for me, what's important for me is what is good for Grenada, and hence Project Grenada. Anything that's good for Grenada, Chester Humphrey is on board. Right? So that explains my relationship with Dr. Mitchell. My relationship with Dr. Mitchell is nothing that I have sought for the benefit of workers in this country. Dr. Mitchell has refused to deliver. Whether it's be on the issue of housing, whether it's be on the issue of workers' rights. So for example, let me give you the most recent example, and that is in the dispute between the Bank of Nova Scotia and the Technical and Allied Workers Union on which law was applicable in respect to the transfer of ownership, right? In the Employment Act, you can transfer your business, you can't transfer the worker. The worker has a right to decide with whom he shall work. And if he decides he's not going over to the successor employer, then he has to be paid his benefits. The Banking Act has a provision which is in contradiction to this. How was that matter resolved? That matter was resolved when simply Dr. Mitchell made it known that he will not execute the transfer as is required in law unless and until the issues contended by the Technical and Allied Workers Union under the leadership of Andre Lewis is resolved in the favor of the union. And he held out. And the bank reached an agreement simply on the basis of that fact.
All right, let's go to another caller here. Good morning, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you. I'm not hearing you clearly.
Good morning,
Is
sir.
this the program?
Good morning,
Hello?
sir, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, I ain't hearing you at all, man. I mean, it's coming terribly low.
All right.
Is this the program?
Yes, sir, it is the program. I'm sorry you're not hearing us. Franklin Mitchell says, George, for the first time, I'm not enjoying your Sunday morning program. I would like to hear from your guest if, at this time, if he has taken back the many condemning statements he had made in Parliament about the current Prime Minister.
George, let me ask that caller something.
It's a statement on Facebook.
Yeah, let me ask that caller something. People have options. They can put their life on hold in the history of the past, or they can move forward. All of us, George, can point to a point in our lives where we said or did something, right? And we are doing something different now. What I said and the positions I took years ago in opposition to the New National Party and Dr. Mitchell, there's nothing for me to take back. My positions were factual. My positions were not personal. They were objective. But I say to the caller, and for those who hold positions like him, today the world is configured differently. In 1939, Germany went to war with the so-called Allies. The only peoples in all of human civilization who suffered thermonuclear war were the people of Japan, when the United States released 2 nuclear bombs on that country. Germany was bombed into surrender. Today, Germany is a solid part of the NATO alliance with the United States. Let me finish, George.
Yeah. We're running out of time.
Japan became the second largest economy in the world, even though the United States dropped 2 atomic weapons on them. Today, Japan is a solid ally of the United States, and their country has benefited from it. Now, I'm coming. If Japan and Germany could leave the past where it is, forge a new relation for the betterment of the people and for mankind, why, if I criticize Mitchell, I can't leave that in the past and form a new relationship for the benefit of Grenadians? And we can see that benefit. The workers can attest to that benefit. And that's my response to that question.
All right. Spice Babes Duncan says, Chester is confusing. Grenada politics today is a reflection of people like him. He once laid down in sacrifice of his life for the working class. Now, public servants are suffering for their hard-earned money. Your present job, Chester, has you singing for your supper.
George, you really think that needs a response?
Okay.
I don't think.
All right.
I really don't.
Tessa Barry says, seems Dr. Mitchell has done no wrong for Mr. Humphrey. Sounds like real glorification.
But that's not true. I've just said, George, that my past criticism of Dr. Mitchell, to my mind, was correct and objective. That's the past. I have a new relationship now, founded on a new matrix, pursuing the same goals that I pursued before, but a different methodology. And I've pointed out to you that that has delivered. I've pointed out to you that workers today can go home with all of their severance pay without paying a single cent in income taxes. I can point out to you today that hundreds of workers receive minimum wage pay that they never used to receive before. I can point out to you today that over the last 3 years, as compared to Barbados, not a single permanent job in the public service was made redundant. These are significant benefits, George.
Ali Mature says, Chester, at the time you were calling for your union members to vote out the NNP, were you not aware of the good the NNP would have done?
Yes, I was aware of the good, but in those days it was my view that the bad significantly outweighed the good until I had the experience of the National Democratic Congress.
All right. Chester, listen, we're out of time. We're out of time. It's been informative. Some people may disagree with me on that, but from where I sit, I think you folks now have a better idea of where Senator Humphrey's head's at. And you heard me offer to have him back here in the future. Chess, anytime.
Thank you.
You can expect a call from me.
Yes, well, call me anytime. As I told you, I have a fairly busy travel circuit.
Yeah,
but there's one
know,
final thing I would like.
Hold on a minute. Some time ago I called you and you did not answer, but I admit that you did return my call. I think you were at a conference.
Yeah, I was in Paraguay at the time when you called me.
And I appreciated that
Yeah.
because let me tell you something.
And when I travel, I can only afford to use Wi-Fi.
You know, I'm glad you returned my call, Chess.
No, but George, I will.
Hold on a
anytime.
minute. The point that I'm trying to make a very important point here. I have been trying to get many people in your administration to come and sit here and talk to me, like in the old days. I mean, you remember the old days. I mean, these guys.
But I was here every day.
Well, exactly. Chess, what are they afraid of, Chess?
I can't, George, I could only speak for me.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I can only speak for me.
So
there's one note I'd like to
Please
end on.
go ahead.
There's never been a time in the history of this country where a government is building 600 homes. Think about it. 600 low-cost, middle-cost homes are being built right now as I speak. 600 of them. Not even during the period of the Revolution, so many homes were undertaken. 600 homes.
You think I can get one?
This year alone. Apply their criteria. This year alone, this government spent to the tune of $45 million in tertiary education. $45 million worth of tertiary education, primarily for the sons and daughters of ordinary working people. This is why I am where I am today, George.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Now, that was Senator Chester Humphrey. Coming up next, yes, where am I? Yes, there it is. Coming up next, we're going to be hearing from the newly elected leader of the National Democratic Congress, Senator not Senator. This is the senator here. We're going to be hearing from Franka Bernardine, and we'll get to her right after this.
With Grenada poised to record its 7th consecutive year of robust growth in 2019, Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Dr. the Right Honourable Keith Mitchell, will present this country's 2020 budget on Wednesday, November 20th, outlining his government's plans to further drive the economy and spur investor confidence. Under the theme Towards Vision 2035, empowering our communities, growing our economy, protecting our environment, strengthening our institutions, Dr. Mitchell will lay out plans to forge ahead with a shared goal for the future, envisioned in the country's 2020 to 2035 National Sustainable Development Plan. The 2020 budget will be broadcast live on GIS Channel 22 and the GIS Facebook page. Beginning at 9 a.m., we will look at some of the government's major projects over the past year. From 9:30 a.m., there will be live commentary, And from 10 a.m., presentation of the 2020 fiscal package. Tune in to the Government Information Service and other stations for the live broadcast of the 2020 budget, Wednesday, November 20th, 2019.
Alec, we're starting work on the house soon, and I'll need your help.
Sure. What do you need?
I got a service application checklist from GrenLec's website.
This looks easy.
It is. We need a new service.
That's option A.
So wherever there's an A, that's something we must do in order to get the service.
So the other things without an A don't apply.
Exactly. The checklist shows us what documents to bring, the fees, and how soon we'll get the service.
So that you realize for all services, we must complete the right application form, have a valid photo ID, and a certificate from the electrical inspector.
That's right. The electrician will help us apply to the ministry for a certificate of inspection. So we'll use the checklist to get everything we need before going to GrenLec. This will make the process smooth and save lots of time.
Okay, might as well get started.
GrenLec, energizing our Grenada.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Why wish upon a star? For a bank is better by far. Whatever you're wishing for this Christmas will give you low interest and no fuss.
Co-op Bank is making Christmas wishes come true. Fix up your home, treat your loved ones, and get everything on your Christmas list this year with our no-fuss loans. As we count down the 12 days to Christmas, you can win awesome prizes every day. Special terms and conditions apply.
Christmas wishes come true with Co-op Bank and you. Welcome home.
Can I have a chicken lunch, please? Large.
Real nice today.
Mm-mm. I don't want that.
But you just asked for a chicken lunch.
I don't have problem with the lunch. Afraid the container.
What is the problem with it?
These styrofoam containers, they don't good for the environment. They shorten with life.
What foolishness you telling me? So what you want me to use?
Put my food in this.
Where you get that?
At the food fair, where you could get all biodegradable food boxes and disposable food supplies like cups, plates, anything you could think about. Name it, it's there. And they don't harm the environment. Food fair, taking the lead in cleaning up and protecting the environment. Hey, like you take me advice, you get in your biodegradable food supplies.
Well, girl, I supporting who supporting the environment. That is why I shop in at food fair.
Food fair, where you can fill your baskets without emptying your pockets. Products distributed by Hubbard's agency, Kirani James Boulevard.
Why wish upon a star? For a bank is better by far. Whatever you're wishing for this Christmas will give you low interest and no fuss.
Co-op Bank is making Christmas wishes come true. Fix up your home, treat your loved ones, and get everything on your Christmas list this year with our no-fuss loans. As we count down the 12 days to Christmas, you can win awesome prizes every day. Special terms and conditions apply.
Christmas wishes come true with Co-op Bank and you. Welcome home.
Christmas safety tips. Always unplug Christmas tree lights before leaving home or going to sleep. Check your tree lights and outdoor lights for damage each year before you use them. Discard lights with frayed wires, loose connections, and cracked sockets. Do not overload your wall outlets or extension cords. Remind children never to touch lights or outlets. Select lights appropriately. Never use indoor lights outside or vice versa. Happy holidays from GrenadaBroadcast.
Yes, sirree. Yes, sirree. Yes, sirree. There she is. I'm still referring to you as Senator Franka Bernardine. How are you, Franka?
Good. Good, thank you, George. I'm really
Ladies and
pleased to be
gentlemen,
here.
please meet the newly elected political leader of the National Democratic Congress. It's her first visit since the election a couple of weeks ago. Thank you so much, Franka. I know you've been kept very, very busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yes. Quite active. And I
What-
want to say good morning to everyone out there.
They're all over the place this morning.
Right. Great to be in touch with everyone, and I am so appreciative and thankful, George, for being able to facilitate this sort of program, you know?
We try.
Yes.
Let's hear about your first few days since your ascendancy.
Is that where you want to start, with the whirlwind?
In the whirlwind. Yeah.
Yes. It's been good because the response has been very, very encouraging.
Okay.
And I keep running into people everywhere who look surprised and pleased. Such very positive reinforcement, and I think it's good for the party. It's certainly good for me, and I feel very, very encouraged. One of the earliest tasks that we set about doing, and we've done a number of them, is to pull in the whole new executive. And I really enjoyed that because it was about what our expectations were, what their expectations are, what mine are, how are we going to look out for each other and make that team work. We spent a bit of the period, actually it was Saturday, and we had lunch together first, and then we went into the meat of the meeting. First part was really a training session, which I believe in, because it is about empowering people to be able to meet their roles and be effective in what they're doing. And that was good. We looked at communication and communication techniques and the whole issue of team building. And in a very interactive way, as I was trained to do when I worked with Peace Corps, if I may put in a little plug there for them. 9-10 years of training, and I was able to bring that to bear, you know. And it went across well because it's a hands-on type of training. And then we got to the main issues that we were asked to focus on. We'd be asked to focus on for the next 2 or 3 years, and what we were therefore responsible for. And spent some time highlighting the issues of finance and PRO, because those are two of the biggest, if not the biggest, portfolios. It was good. We finished a bit later than we had anticipated, almost 5:45, but I think people felt at least they were on target, and that was the idea behind it, to get them focused and to understand new dispensation, what's new about it all, and how we're going to go about this whole thrust. But in addition to that, George, there were a number of meetings, met with some people of the diaspora, had a bowl of soup with them, and that was very encouraging, get their perspective in before they left, and how we're going to work so much closer together and what sort of ties we want to establish. I also was able to start my outreach into the various constituencies, and we began with St. Mark's. Eye-opening to say the least. Eye-opening to say the least. You know, it's really quite an experience. It doesn't matter in what way, because the human experience is like that. Chatting with people and interacting and seeing where they're at and how they perceive themselves and how they perceive the way forward. Very, very enlightening in many ways. Of course, the day before that, I met with the caretaker for the NDC caretaker. And Jerome Thomas gave his perspectives on where they were at and the sort of support they would need and so on. And then I met with the people out in the field. And, you know, if I could summarize one thing, it was very disturbing to me that we still have so many people in the rural parts of Grenada where they do feel that the way to earn money is a handout on Saturday morning rather than a way of investing in business. I don't think they see their whole worth as a people, or that they could do so much better if they were empowered to do things within their community that could generate the sort of income. For the older ones, well, at least they could encourage the younger ones. And for the younger ones, there's plenty more hope than that. It's not about a handout at all, and therefore who hands out to you is who you are beholden to. And, you know, there's an element of fear as well that I picked up, that they're afraid to say anything. So it's easier to just lie down quietly and take. It's not about that at all.
That's a big problem in this society today.
Big problem, big problem. But it was coming to it face to face. And of course, all the other little injustices. I ran into a gentleman who, in fact, has never been paid for paving the steps and so on that he did in St. George's because his contract got messed up with the original contractor who was fired. The bottom line is that his money is tied up with that, and therefore what he has to share with his family, they have so little, you know. And that's why I like to go out in person, because when you start to talk, you must talk from a position of authority, where you've been and you've seen and you've experienced. And so that part was very disturbing still to me, that people still think that it's about a handout and there's nothing else they could do. Not empowered at all to grow and develop.
You know, Franka,
yes.
I'm sure you have already recognized this even before being elected political leader, that you got some big challenges on your hands. Challenges such as, you know, education, empowering the youth, inspiring and mobilizing people. But you know, Franka, in my humble opinion, perhaps one of the biggest challenges you're going to have to overcome is weaning the Grenadian people of that dependency syndrome, the handouts.
The handout syndrome. The handout syndrome.
That's a big thing in this place.
It is a huge factor, and the people that really need the changing are the politicians for having sold that concept to Grenadians for this long. It is a tragedy to prevent other human beings from being able to think clearly about what and how they could, in fact, make a future for themselves and their families, you know?
Do you believe you can help to change that mindset?
Oh, we can. We certainly can. All mindsets are changeable. And as big as a task may be, it will take time. See, it will take time because behavior change is something that takes time with people. But as my daughter often says to me, the one away, that, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One mouthful at a time, the same way you eat a sandwich. It's an old Chinese proverb, but it is so true, you know. But it has to start somewhere, it has to start soon, because we have to, development depends upon people being able to see another vision and to understand their role in that vision. Tragic that we should have brought our people to that. It's a Caribbean problem as well. And we think that's called a good politician.
Tim Ortega says here, the people of St. Mark have a culture of dependency after 13 plus years as MP. What does Dr. Modeste have to show? Now, there's an interesting comment here from Wayne Francis. He says, you are carrying a heavy load, but I believe your intelligence and your love for country will prevail.
Thank you very much for that vote of confidence. It's forward on, my friend. I am going to press on. And I've seen how changes in attitude bring about a whole different result. And we've got to have that change in attitude. You know, the growth of a country cannot take place unless we learn certain basic phenomena. Education, of course, goes a long way to that, and it's the empowerment of the mind. Not necessarily and exclusively academic education at all within a classroom setting, but indeed putting people to think and showing them a vision that is much bigger than that. I look in truth at Victoria, that was the other side of it. I looked at it and I said, what a beautiful little town. Well, I know it well because we've always passed through there from childhood, going up to visit my grandmother in St. Patrick's. But so little has changed from those days, you know. And I said to myself, gosh, if there were 2 or 3 hotels, 2 or 3 business investments. Well, we know the story of those various investments, the chicken farm. We know the sad tales that come out of that. I'm not going to dwell on those today. But it also occurred to me that even if those hotels and guest houses and opportunities were there, our people are not trained and qualified to handle it. You know, they'll be brought in to clean the floors and so on, but you need far more infrastructure than that, so that when the big opportunities come, your people are empowered. They have the skills, they have the knowledge, they can take up their accounting positions, they could do so much more. That is why the education is so fundamentally important for every child, every child. So there's a lot there to be done. You know, George, there was a visitor that came in about 3 weeks ago from the Bahamas, young woman, and she was here, we were chatting a bit on things and so on, and she looked around and said, well, what is different? She had never visited the islands of the Eastern Caribbean at all. There's no need to come south. They go everywhere else and to the bigger areas, you know. She came and she said, the mountains are so exquisitely beautiful, but we don't have anything like this at all. All we have is sand and sun and our people. And I said, that's right. She says, but look at what all you have. I went up to the waterfalls, I said, right again. But what do we do with them? So here they are with just the basics, and they managed to build such a country and such an economy. And they weren't always at that level, you know. I understand from the older heads right here in Grenada and others who lived and worked out there in those times, that in 1949 the Bahamas was, quote unquote, and please don't be offended anybody, a backwater. And that is how they were functioning until the education was one of the big factors that empowered that nation. I was at school at university with Bahamians whose parents were given, I've quoted this before, $60 a week for each child that attended school up to sixth form level. This was in the sixth form. If your child went into sixth form, you could collect $60 for each child to help with the transport, the food, and so on. And some families had 3 and 4 children going. So, but that's so important was the education thrust for them. And that would have been in the 70s, 60s and 70s, when there was an all-out push to get all children out of school and into colleges and universities. University of the West Indies absorbed a big number, and of course also in the US, wherever. But the drive was so big and the support for it that here we are today. They're all educated, well-knowledgeable people. I mean, the average person on the street can give you his role in tourism the way a sophisticated, educated person could, because they are all empowered and educated, very much like how Barbados did it, you see? So there is plenty of hope, plenty of hope. That is why the emphasis is there. Yes.
That is encouraging. Franka?
Yes.
Listen, we only have about an hour and 5 minutes left. There's a lot of ground that we got to cover. But I know that you're still new to the game as the new political leader. And I think you have, what, 3 years to prepare for the next election?
Yes, or 4. Well, hopefully less than 3, but it is about 3 years before, yes.
Okay, but there's a lot to be done. And I'm not going to put you on the block here, but I want you to give us some ideas. Let's start with education. How would you like to see our education system changed in as few words as possible?
Well, start by saying it must be appropriate. In other words, it must be tailored to the job market. And that was already done. It's just a matter of maintaining it. It must give every child an opportunity to develop his skills. It must do so from primary level. It must also be that children coming out of secondary school must go straight into college So it's from secondary into college for 2 years, not from secondary out onto the streets. We must push heavily to give every opportunity to anybody, but particularly the young people, in getting their academic qualifications at a college and at a university. We must therefore support the colleges and universities in this area, starting with UWI. It's really where it's all at. Education is the critical.
It's important. It's important. And I'm sure there's more to be said. But let me sneak this call in. Good morning. You're on the air. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is a program?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not hearing you too clearly. You're very, very low. I don't know if you can put some volume on your send equipment back to the line, but you're very, very low.
All right. Sir,
Yeah.
we're peaking here, so I'm not sure. But anyhow, go ahead with your question, please.
Hello?
Go ahead with your question, please.
Okay. Well, it's not really a question, but it's a compliment. Look, let me just say that I feel a new sense of great expectation as Sister Bernardine would have ascended to the leadership. And I just heard us spoke about education and the question of financing education. And I just want to say that, you know, it makes ideas start growing because of the new faith within the leadership. And that is good. And one of the things I wish that could have happened, if us in Grenada, and I'm talking about families, could have begun to put aside $50, working families, all type of working families. So the Bernardines, the Redheads, whoever the families, could have put $50 into a savings so that we can begin to educate our young people. That will be tremendous. Sister Bernardine, God bless you and all the best.
Thank you so much, sir, and wonderful idea. It starts with sowing the seeds. Maybe they will.
Corporal Knott here says, and I'm sure he's referring to education, he says it should be affordable. That's an issue, isn't it?
It is an issue. And it's something we look at all angles of it. That is why the book program, for example, was introduced, because it's a big factor. You can't get it without information being provided. And so that was our attempt to provide that sort of support for parents. They cannot afford that. Then there are various uniform programs, but those should come secondary to the book knowledge. You can't learn from a uniform. You could look good, but you can't learn from a uniform. So you need your books. In addition to which, equipment like, for example, the technical subjects. I remember when 2009 we reintroduced, because it had been taken out in the last occasion, the last government, we reintroduced technical education into the primary schools. And the cost of equipping meant we had to phase it in. But the diaspora was very good in that. They required a list, and we did the list according to school, particularly in the St. David's area, so that past pupils of that school living in the diaspora could contribute to, for example, Corinth Government or Pomrose, their old school, and they could contribute 20 saws or 30 screwdrivers, as the case may be. That drive worked well, but of course we came out shortly after that. So I don't know if that continued or what happened in that regard. Lastly would be the National College. We had just made arrangements with the banks because we had called for a meeting of all the bankers. It was held down at SGU, facilitated there physically. And the point I had put across to them is that I don't need the traditional ways of raising a loan, because those most parents don't qualify for. But how can we go about making a small loan of, say, $3,000 per year available to parents or to a student? Maybe the student supported by the parent to be able to attend National College. And it worked very well. In fact, the female banker in the group was the one who said, well, if you give us a piece of government land as security, we can allow them to borrow against that. And that's exactly what we did. Identified 2 areas in True Blue, because that was the most expensive land at the time, that would allow so many students to be able to borrow against that security of land, and therefore be able to afford to pay, and put the thing on the student rather than on the parent, because it becomes a burden for the parent, whereas the students are young and up and coming and should pass and should get through, and we wanted the loans put on their hand. So this was a very workable idea, and I do hope that by the time we get back in, because I believe it was dropped like so many other things, so it never came through, and so you have the choice again, who can afford to go on to National College and who can't afford to go on. I mean, there's scholarships out there, a dime a dozen, on the net, and if you know where to access and how to look for it, and the sort of backing that is required, a lot more people can get even. When we created the scholarship desk in the NDC and set it up to access those opportunities, and in my own briefing to them, I remember saying so many times, the answer is yes. It is not about no. It's not about telling parents there isn't. We have to have a far more positive approach than that, you know? And when you bring them in, you sit with them and you go through, you the person at the ministry, go through the list of possibilities, go online, look and see, give them hope as well as opportunity. And that's how we managed to produce the record numbers that we did during that period of time.
Here's something really worth thinking about. There's somebody in New York listening to you now. His name is Kipling Francis. He says, Ms. Franka, please bear in mind that there are people who are not academically inclined, but have a lot of great ideas worth pushing. You know where this person is coming from, eh?
Very much so. Very much so. In fact, it's not about at all. It's not about narrowing down onto academic people at all. It's about utilizing the skills of people wherever they are. Some people are good in both combinations of academic and technical, all kinds of technical skills. Some people are good at empowering people, listening to them, coming up with ideas, just as you pointed out. The key to the thing is to be able to use people in whatever skills they have, you see? And therefore we have to get away from the standard look of the 8 subjects and just in the limited scope. That is why we introduced in 2011 the performing arts, for example. And that brought, I remember the first 11 students that sat the performing arts at CXC. They did tremendously well. And some of them went on. In fact, I ran into a gentleman, several teachers were given the opportunity to go away and study drama and dance and theater production. In fact, I ran into one of them, a theater production teacher, who was saying thank you so much for the opportunity because it is such a new area in Grenada, and how committed he is to empowering other people to be able to go this way. It's about all the skills. It's about counseling, it's about personal development skills. The whole package, education package, has to move away from just an academic thrust.
All right. And I would imagine that the public can look forward to hearing some of the strategies you would like to employ in the coming weeks as you folks develop, okay?
Yes, quite correct.
Let's leave education for a minute and talk about empowering women as an example here. You know, in Grenada we boast about the numbers of women that we have in Parliament. You're one of them, you were one of them. But that progress, Franka, has really not been manifested or translated into influence as far as the decision-making process and agenda setting are concerned. Is that going to be one of your priorities, Franka?
It certainly is. It certainly is. And it is, as you rightly pointed out, George, the issue of empowering the women. It is not about just taking a token number of women and putting them into a government. And it's about far more than that. It is in leadership capacity to be able to influence the outcomes of various decisions and programs, because having walked it, you are clearly, very clear in your mind as to how it can and cannot happen. For example, the whole issue of motherhood and the women in Grenada, you know, and the opportunities that should come to them that don't. I'll give you one example. There's a young lady that I happen to be in contact with in the South. And she had 8 children. She was on the job. She had 8 children. I don't think she was more than about, if she was 31 or 32, that would be plenty. Her last child was a year and a half. And she just had not yet to drop out of school at 12 because she was pregnant. I do believe the stepfather, I think I mentioned that before, was the father of the first child, and so on. But a young woman like that, now I noticed her, how it came to my attention was the way she would stay back after school and a teacher would help her to learn the computer skills in an attempt to upgrade herself. And she was catching on. I watched her very fast, learning quickly. And I'm saying to myself, in our society, a young woman like that, what are her chances of upgrading her skills so that she could get a better job, maybe get something that pays better rather than what she was presently doing, which was her cleaning job. Nothing wrong with the cleaning, but her ability was a lot higher than that. And there really is no chance, and other than a teacher taking empathy. You see, giving her the chance and teaching her after school. Where does a young woman like that empower herself? You see, we don't have those kind of support mechanisms in place at all. That's why we must be very careful in our developmental projections. We must take into consideration the reality of what's on the ground. What is this lady living with? And bear in mind too, that as we influence her, she influences 8 others. Now, the whole thrust with the women's program, and I salute the women of this nation as I do every occasion that I get a chance to do so, for carrying the burden of a job in addition to raising the children of our nation. That is a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. And that is women who have lived through this, know the struggle, like myself, and therefore you're able to influence the policy to provide the support. She can't come during the day, but if there was an institute that offered that evenings, just like you do with evening classes and courses, exclusively for that kind of person, you will see how it will pick up. Bearing in mind too that the women are 51%, well 50 to 51% of the working force of the country. So when you empower them to that extent to be productive, it is bound to benefit everybody in the long run.
Yeah, but Franka, I was referring especially to women in the administration.
Yes, who are already there.
Yeah, who are already there, Franka. I mean, great disrespect has been shown to female parliamentarians in recent times. And we have not heard anybody really talking out about it.
Yes, at all. Well, they're not empowered enough to talk about. It's about keeping quiet so that when you're told what to do, you do. And that is not empowerment at all. That is, well, George, the whole style of management I have big issues with. I don't believe in the big stick method at all. I think it's the old slave method that was used to subdue the slaves, and therefore we are long past that. It's about empowering people and allowing them to problem solve, to learn all of those different skills, rather than dictating how they are to respond. I find it such an antiquated, unfortunate approach to management. Management is about working together as a team, using your skill as a leader to be able to empower others to produce and to be part of. Brings about a lot more dialogue and discussion and difference of opinions. But along with that comes training that allows you to understand how to differ with other people. You know, even as you look within the public sector, I have found that the most qualified staff, and I've worked in 4 islands, Bahamas, Jamaica, Barbados, and of course here. But the most qualified staff was right here in Grenada. Every second person in that Ministry of Education had either a curriculum development degree or early childhood degree. They all were, but virtually emasculated by the fact that they couldn't take a decision. From the time we empowered the principals to manage their own schools and went down and visited every school and said, you are responsible, manage the school. And if you run into issues, we are here. I remember even promising principals, starting with Westerhall Secondary, that the day you called and you didn't get support, I could be down with a team. And not only with a team, but we would walk with the army if necessary, or the police force representatives if necessary, because children cannot control what is happening at the school. There was a young man beating up a young lady at the particular school that we visited, right on the ground. And the staff could not come out at all. They had to stay in the staff room because he threatened them as well. You can't have children in charge of the school. So, but they're so unempowered that they stood back thinking, no. It can't work that way. They must be empowered to be able to come out and stand firmly with whatever is happening, or lay down the law, and if necessary, call in the people who carry out the law.
Here's something that I hope you'll find very encouraging. Sharon says, Franka, I know of a professor who will volunteer his time to do some training with your team on empowering, okay? With emotional and other coping skills.
Sold is all I could see. And I will get the particulars from George. We do need that overly in every sphere. As I was saying, even at the ministry, where people are so capable, they're very capable. So the minute you say, well, I need a curriculum with this in it, I'm not a curriculum expert. You know, my knowledge is limited to the sciences and the offshoots of that, and of course community development, which I worked in for a number of years. But you are the curriculum specialist, and you see what they put together, a beautiful blend of possibilities with not only the academic, but technical and personal development in equal emphasis. Same with the early childhood, same with the documentation, same with the IT people. I discovered they were highly talented people, but very stunted in their ability to either problem solve or make things happen, because that's how we raised them all. See, we told them to keep quiet, shh, because you'll get victimized, and as a result we have the product. People are not freed up to think and create and look for new ways and new initiatives for doing things. So point well taken. I'd love to take this offer up, because that's what is needed.
All right, Sharon, you're going to have to contact Ms. Bernardine. Alison Mathlin says, yes, education is the key in these modern times. But what about agriculture? All we got is the land. A nation that cannot feed itself is a nation of beggars. Too much of our land is now idle. You given much thought to where you're going with agriculture yet?
Plenty. It's jumping off the walls at us from everywhere. Absolutely critical and essential. I put it right alongside education and health. Critically important. Because one, there is so much potential. Two, in today's modern world of technology and so many other thrusts, you know, all sorts of things are possible. We have to be able to produce, to look after, feed ourselves, you know. And there are people willing. We have a slight attitudinal problem, which is easily addressed if you work through the schools, for the young people to see how this can be a business, for example, and a successful business. To understand that we have to move away from the concept of whatever stigmas were attached to agriculture in the past. That is really of the past and completely dead. There's so many possibilities. I look, for example, at the beekeepers, who I had privilege to chat with one up in the Victoria area. And the gentleman was saying to me that he would like to look into using the byproducts, the propolis, from the bees, propolis, that That's the sort of cement, waxy cement that is used to seal off the little cells in the beehive. But the sort of medicinal, apparently that has antibiotic value, which I myself was not aware of, but all the byproducts that he could use from the beehive, that's where he wants to go. Look at something like that, for example. You know, there are all kinds of possibilities, but we must show the vision to the young people. We must expose them, we must show, and that's a sophisticated one. There's so much that could be done in the basic crops. People like Dr. Campbell will tell you at length. It's a pleasure listening to them. All the sort of different ways in which the many programs could be brought to bear, and then we have to be importing so much of our stuff, even beef from St. Vincent, you know? It's really quite unbelievable through CARICOM, but at the same time we must be able to at least feed ourselves.
I am trying to accommodate as many people here, so if you find me scooting around from topic to topic quite a bit, it's just because I'm trying to be accommodating. John here says, Franka, do you think the present females in government are empowered or just towing the line? Would your female MPs be fully empowered?
I can't make any pronunciations on the present team, in the sense that I could only say I suspect, don't know what's inside of a person's mind, but I don't know whether it may be perhaps needing more exposure in the particular field and not being clear on everything, the way forward for everything, because I know the emphasis is on winning votes rather than on knowing how to manage, or knowing how to manage a ministry, or how to get anything out of it, or out of workers, or empowering workers. I don't know how much knowledge there is in that regard at all. But certainly I would suspect if they were given perhaps more free rein and empowered with additional knowledge and information, they should be able to achieve, you know, a lot more in social development, in legal affairs, in all the different departments, really. With respect, it's about selecting people. This country is full of capable female managers. Look around and see them. They're managing from shops to their own households, to the details of banking and accounting and all the firms, different areas of endeavor. They're managers, female managers across the board. I have no doubt we could pull this show together. Pretty certain. And what is more, it is not about selecting people only who can win votes. Because having won the vote, you need the knowledge when you get in to know what to do and how to do it. Our female MPs, we would try to select as carefully as possible, as we have done in the past. I make reference time and again to a person like Sister Cecilia and John, who, if given the social services, you would understand what a well-structured social services that meets all the needs without all the crises we seem to go through, because she knows what to do. She's done it already for 12 years and been trained overseas for many years. So she has brought back to bear that kind of knowledge. And I must say within the NDC, there are people with good knowledge, because we choose candidates on that basis as well. Once you get in, the second part of the struggle begins, or the real part, which is to implement what needs to be done.
All right.
I have another comment I'd like to make on another member. But I don't know if this is the time or if you want to take a call.
Just not a call, but oh, by the way, folks, you can talk to us at 415-0631. This is on social media. Tim Tom Ortega says, what plans does the NDC have, once in office, to investigate the many allegations of corruption in the safety net program of the Ministry of Social Development and throughout government?
Indeed.
Is this going to be a priority?
Believe you me, we are in such a state at this point in time that I cannot tell you that it will be the first matter order of business at all, in the sense that we must get ahead. But it's a critically important aspect. It certainly would be addressed and looked at. Well, for that matter, part of the review, before you could move ahead in socials and to do anything, or to see what you can afford, you must be clear on what is happening and how it's done. Now, I know, for example, the SEED program, SWD, was introduced during the time of the NDC. And in fact, I remember Sister Sandra Thomas was the MP, was the PS, was the PS for that department when it started. I took a great interest because they worked alongside education very closely. And parts of what we had in education had to be surrendered to the SEED program and taken care of under that, because it was a much broader perspective. It was the whole child as a whole, rather than just providing transport alone for school, which is what we were doing. Yes, so that the opportunities now to focus on would be of great importance, let alone what was happening in the rest of government. As long as they were proceeding above board, we don't have an issue at all. We should be through that phase quite swiftly if everything was going according to how it is supposed to go. But it's important always to screen, look back, see what's happening, and be able to therefore move forward in various disciplines, you know? So I hope that answers that question. There's no question about disappearing things and it's not being investigated. Then it would be no point. You open yourself to the same thing happening again.
But then, you know, there's the risk of these investigations becoming an obsession.
Yes.
You know, you have to deal with the issues. There's a lot of corruption in this place.
Yes.
But so far, it seems to me like the opposition has been somewhat obsessed with just pointing at all the wrongs. And I'm going to get to that a little bit more in just a bit. But somebody here is saying, this is Rolanda McQueen, saying, by the time we decide what we're going to do with our lands, it will be all sold to foreigners. Does the good lady know that a large amount of our agricultural land is now being sold as we speak for peanuts?
It's a big concern, Ms. Rolanda, big concern, and it is a big concern of the party. In fact, I think Sandra Ferguson, in her letter on the weekend to NDC leadership, namely myself, raised it so clearly and so aptly, because there are deep concerns. And if it is one thing that touches all Grenadians, that seems to touch all Grenadians and they cry out about it, is the disappearance of their lands. I mean, nobody minds if the developmental process requires, if we were consulted, if we understood and we said, well, all right, this we could work with and this we can't work with. But there's no consultation at all. You just hear. Like the lady in Sates who called me and told me the land next door to her was sold to a Russian and she could not figure out. The man couldn't speak any English. He said he owned a piece of land. Somehow they gathered that. But no one said anything to them. They were not aware of it. These things bother people. There's a finite amount of land in our country. And we have already agreed by policy that, for example, land on the coast cannot be sold. It can only be leasehold. It cannot be what they call freehold. Yet we see time and again land being sold freehold. And if you inquire, then, you know, people on the other side jump up to inquire, why are you inquiring? This is not being handled properly at all. I recall even Ms. Ferguson made reference to reacquiring land. I remember our struggle when we first came in 2008, the NDC government, and what went on with what used to be the Grenada Beach Hotel that became the Holiday Inn, that went through that series of ownerships. And the fact that it was sold to a Grenadian, but it's how the whole thing emerged and how it was handled, that it slipped out of our own possession completely. And the Tillman Thomas government, I can't go into the details of that now, reacquired it and said, well, I think we had to pay $5 million to get back, to change the contract and so on, to make sure it happened. And as soon as this government got in, they returned it. You see? So there have been efforts. It isn't that we haven't been conscious, extremely conscious of all of these processes. But the decisions are taken by one soul, and, you know, in a despot, this is what happens.
I think the public is going to need to see some sort of policy for handling foreign investors clearly enunciated.
Yes.
And also the people of Grenada have some say in what is done with their land.
Yes, indeed.
It's just slipping away from us.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. All right. If you were to form the next government, what would you like to mostly accomplish within the first 100 days of your administration?
I think we would like to put certain situations immediately into effect, a number of them. But certainly amongst them, we would like to firm up what is happening with our health program, first and foremost. We'd like to know that we're back on track so that in a year's time, we could brag of having a hospital where we could address the needs of all of us. It is very disconcerting to have a health situation the way we have it here and now. We would want to see certainly the tracks laid down to continue that and to ensure that things happen along that line.
And would that include making sure that the current health insurance scheme works?
Yes, well, we hope to start from tomorrow trying to listen, as we're finally hearing now. I'm attending a workshop tomorrow in which the matter of the National Health Insurance is going to be, this rollout is going to be discussed, I gather, before the budget so that it can be claimed at least. This is so long in coming. The NDC government started this process back in 2012. And having then put everything into place, it has taken this government from 2012 to 2019 to try to get it together. What they have gotten together, we don't know. But we'll hear tomorrow what it is they have in mind. Now, I don't know what it is. As I said, we're about to discuss it. So we will now hear what they have and how workable it is going to be and how meaningful it will be. But I think of all the people who lost their lives in the interim and all the rest who had to pay and run around with sheets of paper to collect money to travel overseas while they were trying to come to terms with what should and should not be done. When in actual fact, of the 21 steps that were to be taken, the NDC had taken 17 of those. So we were in the last few stages. And I have the notes, by the way, from all these meetings. So no use for anybody to claim it didn't occur or it was a figment of our imagination. They're there, right there in the ministry, and would be in all the different ministries. And I have my own notes on this. So I know that where we were, but we came too far, George, to let that go.
You know, something that puzzles me is that a couple of years back, I thought that by now this health insurance plan would have been in operation.
Absolutely, and should have been.
You know, it really baffled me, I think a week or two ago when I heard that consultations are now being undertaken.
Yes.
After all the pronouncements that had been previously made.
That's correct. That's correct. But it's a pace at which I think management, bad management, plagues this government on all scores.
Is it just bad management or politicking?
Good point. Good point. In a lot of cases, it is just that. The politicking and taking decisions, political decisions, rather than taking decisions in place of the need of the people. The focus must be on the need of the country. And one of my biggest tasks is going to keep our team, our NDC team, focused on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. Don't waste time fighting on either side. Fight forward so that the country's development could be put there as a priority. Rather than have us look good or that the NDC started this project, the thing to do is to complete the project, not to withhold it or to keep it around or to throw it down because it will make one party look good and the other not. The partisan politics is killing us and we have to rise. That's part of our new vision, George. We have to rise well over that, well over that.
All right. Here's one that I've just been waiting to get to, Franka. You obviously are aware, you and your party are aware that you've got some incredible challenge challenges ahead of you. But I really don't believe, and I think the general public is becoming optimistic, that no challenge is insurmountable if you really put your mind
Absolutely.
to it. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think we're also very acutely aware that we live in a society today where there is a real disconnect between the administration and the people.
Yes.
The administration is telling the people what they want them to hear. When the people speak, I mean, how many times do you hear about consultation, and then the public voices aren't heard? What the heck's the sense of having all these consultations if you ain't going to listen to what the people are saying?
Yes.
And Franka, to be very honest, as recently as last night, somebody said to me, George, the NDC is going to have to listen. They have a tendency not to listen. Franka, speak to the public. Look into that camera there and speak to the people. Provide them with some level of reassurance that they will be. Your slogan is, let the people's voices be heard.
Let the people's voices be heard.
Assure them that you're serious.
And interestingly enough, George, that's where I was going to start this morning, because I thought, let me just quote you a little part. I thought I could spend a minute or two just saying a bit more about myself and leadership. Interestingly enough, the first point I thought when I was going through in my mind and putting my thoughts together, and I thought I would like to say to people that I personally am a good listener. I am committed to creating teams of people who are good listeners. That program, that caller so clearly expressed, exactly put a finger right on what is the most important. We don't listen to each other, you know. We don't listen to each other in this country at all. It's about pushing your perspective on other people. You see, that's why I say the style of management is so poor. It's not about browbeating each other. Out of the many ideas that emerge from every suggestion is where you will get the answer. You see? And I have found in my experience at the ministry, Grenadians know how to solve their problem. All you have to do is to listen. The suggestions would come from the most amazing quarters. So the point about being a good listener is absolutely critical. While it's about that, I also wanted to say I am a very firm leader. Fairness is important to me. I don't believe in that style of force of management. There's so many other styles that one could assume that is so much more empowering. And if we listen to each other, we will solve most of the problems that we have. Well, I've already told you that. I'm a Caribbean
that's at the
woman.
party level as well?
Yes, that it is, because that's where we started now. In our new vision, the very first thrust is in personal development. Personal development. I want to thank Ms. Ferguson, Sandra Ferguson, for her open letter with all her criticisms and constructive comments. Very powerful letter, and of course she's spot on as usual. She puts her fingers quickly on this. I wanted to say as well that I agree that politics is brutal and can even be dangerous, and maybe even more so for women. But without change and new vision, we cannot rise out of the morass that we find ourselves in at this point in time. It must be a change in attitude, change in our approach to doing things, change in our approach to getting things done. We must be in a building mode, not tearing down, heavy criticism, not in strife and rewarding only people who support a party. All of that has got to go. Now, we did create the morass, mind you, by ourselves, by not seeing clearly and evaluating what is before us, what has to be faced, and so on. We must now think our way back out. And I'm saying to you, problems must be resolved with new thinking. The old way of thinking will bring exactly the same results as you have now. And it starts, therefore, with the personal development of our own team, which we started with. That's why I told you we started there, and that I mentioned, George, and that we intend for the first 6 months to go through a series of training sessions on team, on working together, on resolving conflict. Our people don't know how to resolve conflict, you know. They think every difference of opinion is an occasion for a fight. You can't make progress in the world that way. Employers will look past you. They want people who understand how to work with each other. And for us to get that message across, it has to reflect in our own attitudes. Therefore, I can't see how we could start anywhere else other than to run alongside what all we are doing, a series of training programs. It is so vitally important. I can't explain how it is affecting our productivity and employment. I remember when we were in government, one morning the Prime Minister called and he said, Mrs. Bernardine, I'm sending down a gentleman to you. Please see him and explain what's going on. The gentleman had set up a business in Grenada to employ 300 Grenadians. And he had so far employed about 150 to 160. It was now 2 years into the program. And he rarely came because he's moving out. He subsequently left. He said, I cannot explain to you the attitudes, how your children lack the basic attitudes of what you should do. They can't take correction. They get upset if you explain to them they can't be walking in late. They don't come to work for 2 or 3 days. The work ethic is extremely poor. And he says, I am leaving and I'm going to Antigua. And he did. All I could say to the gentleman is that know within you, sir, that we have started to address this problem. This is something that the World Bank in its report of 2008 called School and Work in the Eastern Caribbean mentioned that Grenada had the highest problem as registered in the Caribbean. Guyana was second to us, and then all the other islands. Major problem with attitude change. We can no longer, with bad attitudes, we can no longer ignore this.
Somebody's been waiting here. Good morning, you're on the air.
Yes, good morning. Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm just delighted with Sister Franka's presentation, and I want to just add something here to her. Whether or not, I'm suggesting in her planning and so forth going forward, in organizing the party and so on, whether or not it will not be wise, I'm just throwing this out, for her to set up a shadow cabinet and appoint individuals that you may, as the leader, see with a particular potential and ability in different disciplines. So you have a shadow person for health, you have a shadow person for education, etc., etc. And so that these persons can report directly back to your party. So when you sit, you will have specific information emanating from that person based on their own investigation and research and so on. And then the party as a collective body can dialogue on the specific, matter issue to help chart the way forward in preparation for the eventuality of forming a government. And also, Sister Bernardine, please look at having some kind of organization, be it regional, be it international, or wherever, or even local perhaps, to give those individuals training for preparing them for parliamentary presentation, etc., etc. Thank you very much.
Well done and well said, sir. Yes, we do intend, it's on our agenda there to set up a shadow cabinet with just that, the empower them with the ability to deliver effectively, to research topics, to be on top of it. We have not, 1 or 2 of the slots are already becoming quite evident who will perhaps lead them, but as you rightly pointed out, they need management skills, they need many other skills to do with it, and above all, the people who have held those positions before, I think are a great resource to explain the sort of situations that one meets. It looks simple, but it is highly complex. And you want to be as prepared as possible, and certainly the training and preparation for going to Parliament is part 2, an equally important part. Because you see, you don't want to find yourself, as you're rightly pointing out, being in and not being able to handle the portfolio, as is happening with our present dispensation. Too many people do not know.
Good morning, Corey, you're on the air. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Citizen Grant. You see, you're so low. But I speak nonetheless. Good morning to you, Mrs. Bernardine.
Good morning,
Greetings.
sir.
Listen, and two little observations here.
Yes, please.
I heard in your deliberations you speaking of the recuperation of the educational system and so on, and making provisions for the people who have, quote-unquote, fallen through the cracks.
Yes.
I would like to suggest the following you take into consideration. I've thought of it from time to time, too.
Yes.
Take a look at this acronym, NICE, N-I-S-I-E, a National Institute for Students of Inconclusive Education. This would be an institution, a formal institution, where people who passed through the system and did not really gain the education that they needed to take up the challenges of the future to get it, in addition to elderly people, skilled or otherwise, who can participate in it. I'd like you to take that into consideration. Finally, as a person who have lived and worked in government as a minister, as a senator, etc., I want to talk a bit of the Constitution. Are you aware that the Constitution of Grenada is illegitimate? Are you aware of the document of 2002 by Dr. Nicholas Liverpool et al., which recognize that? If you do that, can you make a couple of comments on it? Thank you. Have a nice day, will you?
Okay, Franka, very quickly respond to him. We have less than half an hour, and there are a ton of comments here that I want to get out there. So please, I want you to address all of them, but start with this gentleman.
Yeah, absolutely. A quick
By the way,
comment.
she's been making notes while
Yes.
we're talking.
Because it's an excellent idea, of course, because it means you pick up the people, as you say, who have fallen through the cracks. I think you called it the National Institute for Inconclusive Education. And suggestion well taken, except alongside that, that's all I would add, must be ways in which we can understand clearly why people are still falling through the cracks. And what can we then do to ensure that in due course, 4 or 5 years' time, we shouldn't have need for such an institute. You see, even the changing of the common entrance, from common entrance to its present status, is such that we could, it was meant to give students, instead of a one-off exam, where they just sat and wrote an exam in the morning. If they were ill, rough luck. You failed your opportunity to get into secondary school and so on. The CPEA allows a 2-year assessment. So we should be picking up now the students coming into grade 5. Are they intrinsically weak in English? Then you send them to support classes. Weak in math? Send them to support classes in math and back into the mainstream, so that we should be constantly flowing people and observing where the weaknesses are. So that's the CPEA and what it introduced, why we changed it from common entrance to that. But same principle could apply here. And so eventually we should be clear on what it is that the students, why are they failing? Is it the incompetence of the teacher? Is it the school doesn't have the facilities? Whatever. So we should eventually do that. And I love the idea about the elderly people and the opportunities there. All age groups should be able to be empowered. That now, that adult education needs to be brought alive again like it was. We had a Cuban system here that worked very well for us. The Constitution, well, that would take a much longer discussion and dialogue. The one by Dr. Nicholas Liverpool, as you rightly pointed out. And it remains a topic of great concern for us. Time for us to look and to review, but we must be comfortable as a people in moving forward with who is going to take us in the right direction.
Franka, let's take on social media now. Quite a few comments here. Address as many as you can. Franklin Marshall says, should the NDC fail to investigate and apply legal justice into the many allegations of corruption committed in the past, the people of Grenada will never forgive you this time around. What say you?
I say right on, heads on with it. It has to start with understanding what really took place. When you are leaving government, you have to be sure, but that's why in there you have to be so careful what you do. You know, further to that, George, public funds are a totally different set of rules to private funds when it comes to that. If it's your own business, you may do what you wish as long as you don't infringe the laws of the country, and nothing could be done. When it comes to public funding, it is a different thing completely. Accountability at the highest level. You must at least be aware of what all is going on. They will make mistakes in and between, you know, school feeding this or whatever as the case may be, but you look at it and examine carefully, why did this go wrong? How come this wasn't set up and so on? Because you're held accountable for this. The money belongs to all of us. There has to be different rules that apply to money that's in common. And that's why it has to go through all the steps. We're seeing that, if I may say, in the United States right now, where in fact the businessman who may run his show as if it's a business, a personal business, versus the public, the amount of steps taken, the amount of people it has to pass through. You have to, because the money belongs to everybody.
Richard Holstein says, good morning. Due respect, Grenadians are very much myopic and dumb. They keep doing it over and over, putting one party in power and creating a dictatorship. Grenadians are living in poverty more and more every day. It is a shame to see a small island become a nation of beggars. No independence whatsoever. I'm damn fed up with the whole situation in Grenada. The youths are not politically conscious of things around them anymore. You got an emphasis on the youth?
We do indeed, we do indeed. The young people are going to have to be the vanguard for moving forward. The older heads are critical, and I underscore that, in the wisdom of how to move and what to do. I believe in the knowledge of the older people in this community who have lived through experiences, not necessarily the old age group alone at all. Anybody, in fact, into the middle age who have had some experiences to share must empower the youth with those experiences. But they will have to be the vanguard of the drive forward to change this. The whole attitude, if you look at it, of money is the only thing that counts, and these values cannot move forward. We cannot grow forward with that sort of approach at all. It has to be based on people and people development. It's very clear. But I can understand the frustration of the gentleman speaking. I wouldn't call any bad names, meaning to say any put downs that way, but I could understand his frustration completely and totally.
Rolanda McQueen says, as drought in the Caribbean wears on us, our island faces great risk to maintain the health of our people. Are you going to put laws in place to save our aquifers and springs? Or are we going to allow our island to be polluted by pesticide poison like in Martinique?
Absolutely, madam. Absolutely, if I may say. Well, the environment is near and dear to me because it is part of the study, part of my university training. In fact, I have a management, environmental management, on the whole issue of how to preserve environments in small countries, particularly developing economies like ours. The answer is absolutely yes. The environment is absolutely critical. It must start from children, little ones, as I believe is presently happening, because I'm aware that there are a lot of thrusts into the schools for what they're worth. I don't know if there's any follow-up, but I know it's being presented. And that we must double efforts. I thought some of the environmental thrusts sounded interesting that are presently being undertaken, like the plastics and concern generally for the environmental area. I must say that I see a couple of things happening there. But the answer is yes. We would certainly be pushing heavily for environmental laws and bite
and enforcement.
To the situation.
We have a lot of laws, Franka. We need enforcement.
Well, they have to be enforced. Humans will make mistakes.
Donna Antoine says, and she's quoting here Ernest Hemingway, most people do not listen with the intent of understanding.
Yes.
They listen with the intent to reply. Ain't that the truth?
And it is so true. That is exactly why we need the art of listening is something that we need. We'll have to teach. You need the information. You need to understand how and what.
Okay.
So it's part of a training. It certainly is part of our training.
Ernesto Jose says, as a young Grenadian who has lived more than half of my life in the United States, not aligned with any of the parties in Grenada, neither vote for any, but I am touched with the happenings at home. What would you say differently to convince me to be a part of the new NDC?
I believe that we are going to be on the cutting edge of development in Grenada. It is specific, it is cultural, it is relevant to us, and how the issues that concern us. I don't think we are just satisfied in being mediocre, we're doing something towards health or doing something towards agriculture. The team is a team with a quest for knowledge, understanding, and a very committed team of persons. This thing is a trial and error, or has emerged as a trial and error over the years. We have learned from the experiences and must put them into practice. If not, we haven't learned at all. Our backs are also against the wall. We need to really get things going. According to the economist and philanthropist, I'm not going to call his name because I have not cleared it yet. His information is out on the net, and you could read it as an assessment of Grenada's situation. 91% of the people, he said 9% are benefiting and have a comfortable style of living. 91% are seeing trouble, struggling along, trying to make ends meet. He also makes reference to the class drop, that the middle class are being pushed into the lower class economy, and lower class into a destitute economy. That is a reality. And I hasten to say at the same time, we will hear the rosy side of everything coming up in the budget on Wednesday. You wouldn't believe it's here. I know that our Prime Minister remarks all the time we're the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean, and yet we are fourth in the Eastern Caribbean. I don't know how those two things coincide. Okay. But we have to understand that the picture we're getting is not really, well, you see, as one economist said to me, it looks rosy, but it doesn't address the most fundamental issue, is that it does nothing to improve the economy for the people. And I want to take a minute there, George, if you'll bear with me, that it's more, not only, you see, if you only focus on paying off debt to get a lower GDP, it does nothing for the country except to really put you in a position to borrow more money. That's what paying off the debt and they're doing so rosily about. It does nothing to improve the economy. People cannot improve their well-being because the money is not enough to cover basic needs and to provide what you call a disposable income to play around with, to develop, to move, and so on. So there are mostly low-income jobs in Grenada, and skills people make a little something, but overall income has not gone up. This is the problem. And so we need other additional policies as guided by the economists who know what they're talking about, and others, people in business, people in whatever, to really come up with a system that would allow people to feel the effect of the said economy. GDP is not the only factor at all. The statistics are good and they seem to make sense, but they have nothing to do with the prosperity of the people in the country at all.
And Alexis says all Grenadians should rally around Mrs. Bernardine if we love Grenada and want to see real progress in this country.
Thank you so much.
Alison Mathlin says, what is the NDC's position on tourism and fisheries in the Grenada economy?
I tell you, the tourism is a painful one. I think the people who are in it are making a tremendous effort. But I just want to share a little example of why we have to have a new attitude and a new approach. Now, I do think they're trying the best that they can. And there are one or two people who have it, the management of it under control, aspects of it under control. Let me say to you that when I was, bear with me, when I was working with the US government in the Peace Corps, United States Peace Corps, there were 4 of us managed with an overall manager who was regional director, and we were helping to manage all the islands, right up the chain of islands, and 9 of them in all. And during the hurricane, 2004, when we had the hurricane, my director said to me, you know, there's another Grenadian on the US team. So I said, oh? He said to me, yes, you'll meet him when we go down to the meeting, the hurricane meeting in Grenada, because they're pulling together all the different branches of USAID and so on in the Caribbean region. So we will meet him. When I went down, I met George Vincent, Dr. George Vincent, for the first time, and got to find out that he was a USAID consultant, that the USAID team consulted him anytime they needed to make interventions or programming or suggestions or advice and so on with respect to the development of tourism in Latin America and the Caribbean. Only to understand that this man's thesis, that's when I went to Canada now on our tour and so on and stopped off at his said university, that his thesis was on tourism development in Latin America and the Caribbean. So this is the man that they bring in to do projects in Costa Rica, to do projects. He will say to them, you need to develop ways of raising money at the sites, here's what you could do and so on. Sitting down right here in Grenada, having no input into tourism development. We got the expert right up here, he's sitting in Guelph. And they can consult him and pull him out to do consultancies, and we not even using him to attend a meeting. But we hope to compete with Chastenay in St. Lucia and Vanderpool from the Bahamas, these people who have top-class knowledge, degrees, 20 years experience, etc. I mean, Vanderpool is the top of the line. So we have a top of the line here, but ours can't participate because our system says you have to have nothing to say, even if you are the expert that other countries are consulting. That is what I mean when I come things like that blow my mind, really, you know?
Folks, I'm still trying to get caught up, but you know, some of you are probably saying, how come George is not reading my comments? George is not reading your comments because some of you just don't take the time, and I'm tired of begging you, please, take the time and write so that we can comprehend it. Very often I don't have the time to pre-read your stuff, but I try so hard to make sure that your thoughts, your opinions, your views are heard. But you lead me up a creek, and therefore I simply ignore your comments. I have to be honest, I can't lie to you, I can't. Now, let me get back to some of these here. Somebody named Reginald Amata says, first time I hear the truth and thing with sense. I am an NNP. But this lady is very smart and truthful. Say thank you, Reginald.
I believe. Thank you so much for your kind comments. I really appreciate it.
Sean out there in the Azores says, what is wrong is that we judge the well being of the, I guess he meant we judge the well-being of the people by the size of our GDP. And that money does not come back to the people, not even as a trickle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Joyce Smith says, how would the debt of Grenada affect the NDC in moving forward when elected into government?
I'm sorry.
How would the debt of Grenada affect the NDC in moving forward when elected into government?
Well, if judging from the last experience, when we did move in, you know, you inherit a whole lot of issues from whatever previous government was there. And so it means it slows down the rate at which you can accomplish what all you intend to do, whether you like it or not. Heaven only knows what indeed you will meet. I do happen to have the accounting of what we met the last time, and therefore to what extent it slowed down and influenced what we, and it was to a great extent. It slowed up our ability to get things done the implementation, a lot of matters had to be cleared off. I'm looking as I talk for the statement that I brought with me so that we could see exactly what was in place that had to be done before we did it. As I look through, I see quite a bit of programs. We have the National Reconstruction Levy. We had to offer new tax amnesty. We had to increase the allowance for the public assistance program. We had a large debt to service. We had 53 million years of unpaid claims at the Treasury, and so on. And so there's no two ways about it. The degree to which it's going to be a problem, we cannot determine until we have further projections as to what will. But this was from the last occasion, and this is the sort of situation we met that had to be cleared up before we could actually proceed. And that always is the problem, especially after coming after a government like this. You know, I wanted to throw out to people, we are hearing, for example, in the news broadcast, and I have the date and everything, of course, of it, before people jump in and say it's inaccurate. Grenada's economy remains strong. According to CDB, it's the fastest growing in the Caribbean. Tourism is doing well. Unemployment rate is 16%. I want to ask the people, is this what you see around you and feel every day in Grenada? This sounds like an accurate account to you? Well, that is the reality of what is going on. You can't get a clear picture at all.
By the way, with the economy booming as it is, the NDC should not have any difficulty in having the resources they need to do what they need to do when they get into government.
At all.
Tessa Berry says, economic development does not always transfer into human development. Probably. That's why we're not seeing the benefits of a fast-growing economy.
Yes, absolutely correct.
Richard Holstein says, we had a very positive system of education in Grenada during 1979-1983. We had the continuing education program, which was changed to continuing education program to make the people of Grenada uneducated. This dictator we have in power is very selfish, have no children, and has no empathy for anyone whatsoever. Lord, I made it through that. Thank you. Lydia James says, they better don't try to pay off debt this time around, like they did in 2008, 2013.
Yes.
They didn't get a chance to prove themselves.
Correct.
Rolanda McQueen says, are we going to make it a law that employers should not discriminate against people with disabilities? It seems like we hide them away like they did in the Middle Ages.
I just want to say there, George, that one of the first things within the first 3 months of coming in July 2008, was to put a desk in the Ministry for Special Education with a special education officer. And she was to coordinate all activities to ensure as best an opportunity as could be given to a special needs or otherwise able child or adult would be in place. So it isn't at all about smothering or covering over. We have recognized that. And of course, the invaluable contribution made by Peace Corps during that period of time too, who brought in 7 or 8 specialists to work in the special education at our request.
Erica Mitchell says, listening to Ms. Bernardine makes me very optimistic that we can have a better Grenada.
We could.
She says, I wish you and your team all the best for your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Marcia Gray says, no, it is not. I'm not feeling the effect of that booming economy. Not just you, Marcia. William Simon says, on the issue of environment, how money will be set aside for the planting of trees in Carriacou? What incentives will be given to landowners to empower them to take up such initiatives?
Well, those are very specific questions, and we would have to be advised by the technical people in that area. But rest assured, it is very much on the list of things to be addressed. Carriacou has its own special types of needs, but everywhere needs to address the environmental issue. If not, none of us will live to exist the way we are going.
Franklin Marshall, wheel and come again. Let's see here. Tim Ortega says, George, you made a mistake in not having Ms. Bernardine for the entire program. Your first guest was a waste of time. Franklin Marshall says, success at the next election seems impossible for the NDC. May need some divine intervention. So says Franklin. Richard Holstein says, Center for Popular Education during the period 1979 to 1983. Correction.
Yes.
That's the.
Just wanted to say very briefly, the revolution had some excellent thrusts in education and in health, you know, and certainly it should have been continued, but we added on to that. The NDC improved on that.
Marcia Gray says the people of Carriacou, where is it, and Petit Martinique, always treated as the unwanted stepchildren.
Oh, Lord.
Please, don't give up on them.
Not at all.
Fitzroy says, Ms. Bernardine, thank you very much for educating the masses. Lydia James says, you are a negative person. Not sure who she's referring to. Okay, Franka, listen, 1 minute afternoon.
Yeah.
We could still spend a couple of minutes, but
yes.
Not much. I just want to bring something up here, Franka. You know, you have sat here listening to the comments I've been reading. Franka, everybody is willing to tell you what to do or ask you what you're going to do. I am so disappointed that rather than Grenada saying, hey, here's what I'm willing to do to help you make this happen, because I know damn well you can't do it alone. You can't. Where are those voices saying, hey, here is what I am willing to do to help you, to make this happen? No, no, no. This is what you should do. That's what you should. Damn it. Franka, I'm sorry, but that irritates me. And I don't envy you being in your position. And that's why I hope that your party does not come out at election time making an absurd number of promises to the people. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. This is, oh, life is going to be hunky-dory and rosy. Franka, you and I know that's not the truth.
Yes.
Let me hear you.
Well, George, you're 100% correct in that this experience is a we experience. If not, it's not going to happen. I have no magic wand, and nobody inside of my group has a magic wand to make things happen. This is about people and working with people and working with people's attitudes and getting a building mode, remaining focused, limiting the amount of mudslinging. You see in this dirty political way we have here of slamming each other to the ground and saying bad things about people during an election. It's not appropriate. Perhaps the wealthy countries can afford that. I'm always saying don't measure yourself in America's bushel. Because when you've gone back home, you see there's nothing to eat. But they have the means to be able to have opinions and whatever. They've grown to that level. We don't have that, and this wasting of time with the putting down and breaking people's spirits and so on, this is about togetherness. And if it is one thing I want to emphasize at this point, there is room for all. The focus must be on national development, and that is where I'm going to focus that. Like you always say, what has happened, we have to keep an eye on it.
Yes.
Because we must be able to improve on that. Can't forget that. And condemn ourselves making the same mistake. But let it not be the focal issue, in that we must look at how we are making it forward and receive the comments and contributions. It cannot be done alone, and I am not crazy enough to imagine that it can. So if there is not a we thrust in it, it makes little sense for you or I. It is about people coming out, building all little community groupings, which is what we were saying to the people. Next week we're visiting St. Patrick's East, and I hope to be able to say that as well. It is about building little community groups, business people in the community, farmers in the community, even support groups for grieving persons. You may have parenting groups, all kinds of little youth groups. It's coming together and making things happen within the community. And certainly we can't do that. I see it, I can shine a flashlight and tell you where you're going is the wrong way, as you're going now. You need to go down that road, which is about development, but to get down that road, it has to be people. I can't urge it even more to say, get involved. Even if it sounds like a little support group with mothers with children or young people with children who need support, meeting once a week or whatever. This is what the community groups are about. And this is what we want party supporters, everybody, to be able to do. That's why dividing people politically and creating all those issues is so unhealthy for our growth. People should be free to choose what party they want to be in. But it should not be that the community groups are labeled according to parties and only one set getting support. That makes no sense whatsoever in national development. And so, if I can put it that way, the promises and the getting involved, it needs to happen. The promises are not going to, it hasn't been about talking things that you can't do. I have big issues with that myself, I rather level with the people openly and tell you where we are and what we found. And I expect the criticism, constructive criticism, to come back and say, well, look, this is not happening that way and so on, and that's how we develop. We don't have any more time anymore. It's too painful for everybody. It's time to shake off all these issues. And I believe the National Democratic Congress is well positioned to start again, to begin again. We've learned from all our errors, and believe you me, we are alive and well and kicking. I do not understand how anybody could expect a party that has allegedly lost an election would jump up the next day and start campaigning again. You have to evaluate carefully what has happened and how it has happened. And by the way, that was one of the couple of issues, but we'll come to that shortly. So I wanted to say that we are a party, mistakes are part of life. It's how you grow from them, and whether you learn from them is important. And we have grown stronger and emerged as a force of positiveness, and hopefully a beacon of light and hope, and a clear light for people to follow. That's what we are trying to do. That's why we must focus on our own development as a team, and so Grenadians could better their lives for their children and their children's children. We really are about people development. That is what we believe in. And we are going to grow this Caribbean to be a place that is better for all of us, without the corruption, not just certain politicians, but indeed everyone. And we want to lift the nose of the Caribbean a little bit, and Grenada, and come out of the corruption and the dictatorship and the little men killing each other and all of us for power and so on for themselves. All that phase is a phase behind us. Let's lift the noses a little higher and see how we can make this Caribbean what it ought to be. When you hear the philosophers making their comments, it's really, and telling you, well, it's your wrong choice of politician all these years that has brought you to the level where you're at. We're choosing people who are concerned about themselves and maintaining power, than in fact looking to make us a better country and build the country. So the ball is in our court. We must find a way to do these things. Yes.
Well, listen to this. I think you're going to find this interesting, because this is not coming from a Grenadian. This is coming from somebody who's listening to you all the way across the Atlantic and the Azores.
My goodness me.
Yeah.
Hello out there.
Sean says, I'm here and I'm willing to expose the wisdom of this lady all over the world. I tune in and broadcast the injustice whenever and wherever I can. I am willing to work with anyone who will help us to stop the brutal exploitation of our fisheries and environment. This is what I will do. Sean, thank you so much. And like I mentioned, Sean is not even here in Grenada.
Indeed.
But in Grenada, it's gimme, gimme.
Yes, yes.
And what can you do for me? Instead of, hey, here's what I can do to help. Now, Chanel Farry says, our role to help Grenada will be at the ballot box to remove this current corrupt administration and to give Ms. Bernardine the chance to be the change that Grenada needs. Wouldn't that be too late, Chanel? We have to start now. Don't wait until she gets into office. Please,
oh, Lord.
We have to start now. A change in mindset.
We do indeed, and thank you so much for that level of support. You know?
Donna Antoine says, the secret is not to focus on how to solve the problem, but concentrate on what each and every one of us can contribute to our country, our community, and our neighbors.
Well put.
Thank you.
Well put.
Thank you,
well put.
Donna. Reginald Amata says, I think Grenada and the Caribbean, we didn't grow up knowing how to prepare wealth for our future and our children. We grew up knowing how to work to feed and take care of our children. And we were comfortable. As we travel, we see that we were wrong. Okay.
Well said, well said.
Claudette Joseph says, good day, George, and our dear political leader. George, why is Franka's camera giving us a side-on view?
Perhaps I'm looking into the wrong camera then. Is this a better view, looking this way?
I didn't see anything wrong with that. But Claudette, when you send the resources by me, we will set up an NBC or a CNN or Fox or a BBC. Yeah, when you give me the resources. Thank you. Okay. Dennis Bola says, good day, a question for Ms. Bernardine. How does the NDC plan to reach the large number of undecided voters? As we know, in the last two elections, the voter turnout was not good.
Well, I think when people get hope and see a vision, that they will take a second look. In so many cases, I think they are turned off because of their own past experiences with politicians. They're just indifferent. But unfortunately, as my father used to say to us, politics will interfere with your life even if you don't want to interfere with politics. So you better get involved. And he always used to say that his good friend T.A. Marichaud always told him that. Always said as one good friend to another, you have to become involved in the politics because the politics will touch your life in so many ways. And so I think that if we could show that meaningful things could happen, it cannot happen with part of the society developing and the rest of the society not bothering. If it could have, wonderful. The few of us who got to the top will leave the rest at the bottom, which would be very unfortunate. You cannot move without your neighbor in terms of development. Everybody has to move up together. They do so in different levels and stages because of their own ability. But it can't be that some people move to the top and the rest stay to the bottom. It would bring disparity, which would cause a lack of peace and harmony, which would interrupt those who are in fact living what they think a comfortable life. It doesn't work that way in real life. So I think that if there are can see the vision and we could give them hope again, then they would come out and vote. And we have to, of course, reach them one-on-one. That's why it's so important, even when you're chatting with friends or a neighbor who is new to the neighborhood. There are two groups that really I want to emphasize: the returned Grenadians. My goodness me, a wealth of knowledge, ability, potential. We have to change our attitude to them and see them as great resource people. Do you know, right in this Grenada, there are 2 or 3 persons who functioned at the level of matron of hospitals overseas, and we're sitting here with a hospital that needs management input, that has its workers so demoralized, not incompetent, but demoralized, because the system doesn't allow them to do their jobs properly. We have people who could help. Could you imagine all of those persons pulled together, even on a committee, to advise this hospital how to proceed? They know what to do. There's several of them. And there are many others who are ward sisters and so on. Pull these resource people together and let them help to indicate how this thing should run. And I think giving people hope like that would encourage those who are sitting on the side to get involved, because we can't build unless that happens.
Thank you, Franka. Thank you, thank you. Another Sunday morning well spent. I do appreciate your accessibility. I don't think I've ever invited you to come on my program and you haven't, and I hope you're not going to start now. Thank you so much, my dear. And I'm asking the people, I'm not asking you to support the NDC. I'm asking you to rally around the NDC for the good of Grenada. I really do not believe that anything could be worse than what we have right now. Or I should say, those waiting in the wings could be worse than what we have right now. I truly believe that in my heart. I really do. So please, rather than just telling them what to do, telling them, or begging them to do this, let's hear how we are prepared to help make this dream a reality.
That is where it's at.
Parting word, Franka.
Thank you very much. I want to say to the people out there that NDC is still the best choice for Grenada. I want to say that out of our struggles, we have forged a strong party. We're still growing, but we are much wiser, and we are totally committed to the development of this country. And it's development without smothering people, without a fear of speech or uncertain whether you could say things or you can't say things. And it speaks to the issues of principles and values. The time has come. The change has begun. And I wanted to emphasize that. And I think we could do this, George. I have no doubt in my mind we could do this. It's just a matter of how we arrange our thinking and the step-by-step process. It takes time. Change in attitude takes time. But we have no choice. We have to do this in order to develop our country and get away from all that negativism, putting down, and look towards a glorious little country that God would bless in every way and put it in the arms of the good Lord. We need a government that cares. Thank you.
Parting comments here from social media. Spice Clove says, listen, Grenada, listen to this lady. Yeah?
Thank you very much.
And Kipling says, a good way to deal with NNP supporters is not to tell them how bad NNP is, but just ask them to prove how their lives are better off with the NNP.
Agreed. We want a positive approach.
Yeah.
There's room for everybody too, George? Room for everybody. This is a together thing.
Grenada Sunshine says, inclusion, not division, is NDC's way forward for a better Grenada. Mrs. Bernardine, we trust you. Lydia James says, they will try, but won't make it. She is a strong woman. Let me see your muscles. I'm only kidding. I'm
I
only
thank
kidding.
you for all these encouraging comments, you know, really very, very grateful. They push us forward.
Erica Mitchell says, yes, you can, Mrs. Bernardine. Lydia says, well done, Sister Franka. Richard Holstein says, Grenadians, please take into consideration that Ms. Bernardine is the voice of the people. So, my dear Grenadians, please make a very conscious decision in the building of Grenada for the future. Please look please look around and see for yourself, examining the so-called leadership we have. Whenever this dictator is sick, he runs abroad for medical attention. Shows that we do not have any system in place. Please open your eyes, Grenadian. Arthur Langine says, what a good and wonderful show this morning. Ryan says, we're going back to our roots. Hey, not a bad idea. Simeon McVeigh says, she's so sweet, so authentic, so genuine.
Good.
Grenada needs you, Sister Franka.
Thank you.
Hey, don't make this woman blush in front of me here now, okay? Knock it off.
I'll give it 100%.
Ernesto, who says, I think you meant well, and I wish you the best. Anthony Park says, he's watching and listening. Good morning, Sister Franka.
Morning, Anthony.
Good morning, George. Congratulations to you on your elevation to party leader. You continue along with the party. You have my support.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. John wants to, John is one of our regulars on this platform.
Yes, yes.
He lives in Carriacou, and he wants to know when you're going to be in Carriacou.
Oh, hopefully pretty soon. Carriacou deserves every support. I think you have a function around the 20th of December. I'm planning to attend and spend a day or two before that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Franka. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, George, for the opportunity.
See you soon again, I hope?
See you soon.
Okay. Alrighty, folks. It's now, let's see, 22 minutes after 12. George was naughty, but I thought it was worth it. That's why we did it. Let's take a look at a parting word from the Holy Scriptures. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 12. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Pilgrims, that was from Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 12. Wait, what a morning, what a morning, what a morning. Lydia James says, well-deserved overtime. I'm hungry, Lydia. Are you preparing lunch? I didn't think so. Yeah. Okay. Oh man, boy, they're not finished with you, Franka. Joachim Lewis says, very nice lady. Kathleen Thomas says, she is the responsible mother our little island needs.
Oh, Lord. Thank you.
Mommy Franka. Well, don't be
Thank
surprised.
you. I'm honored.
Don't be surprised if I call you Mommy from now. Yvonne Joseph says, thank you, Ms. Bernardine, for your commitment to serve. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Who's this? Dangles Ras says, can you fix that problem? Or are you going to try and fix it? What problem is he talking about? I don't know. Too late to find out. Wendy Ann Farry Simon says, thank you to the rescue for Grenadians.
Well, I don't know.
Ms. Bernardine, I give you my blessings, and I know you can do it. So says Richard Holstein.
Thank you, Richard.
Let's see here. Ernesto Jose says, you enjoyed Franka today. God help me, please. Ryan Jabon says, thanks, Gigi. With God, all things are possible. Franka, remember that, girl.
Amen.
Remember that.
Amen to that,
all
loud
things
and clear.
possible.
Put it in God's hands.
Amen. Erica Mitchell says, think, my fellow Grenadians, we need to move from our primary level. We have been there for too long. It's our island, and the outcome depends on us.
Well
Way
said.
to go, Erica.
Well said, Erica.
Have a great start to your week, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, my dear friends. Been a good program. Appreciate it. Your support, your encouragement, and I do invite you to join me again tomorrow morning and every weekday morning, 9 till 10, for Good Day Grenada. In the meantime, I'm sending God's blessings your way. I want you to know just how much you are appreciated. Pray for Franka and me. See ya.